You lost a bet, that's why you're here? or
I
you're-
won.
What?
Would there be 10 people or 2 people?
Yeah, so that there's gonna be no one here.
Oh.
What would the
Well,
good
we
stuff-
dropped
How
over.
are people,
Well, I mean,
How can
us,
people
you
stay
guys
away?
are diligent.
I mean, how can you stay away from this stuff? I mean,
It's just
where's the
so much
permit
fun.
process?
Lost our luster.
No, this is not.
Well, it's all-
Okay, let's call to order the Douglas County Vacation Home Rental Advisory Board for our last meeting of 2022. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Lauren, if you
Oh,
think
sure.
you
I can do that.
can-
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lauren. As you can see, we have one member missing today, but we still have a quorum. We'll start with opening public comment. At this time, public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Vacation Home Rental Advisory Board. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker unless additional time is granted by the board chairperson. The Vacation Home Rental Advisory Board uses a timer to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. We will start the timer when you begin. You will be told when you have 30 seconds left and should conclude your comments. Once your time is up, please return to your seat. Sounds better than sit down. You know the drill, Kathy.
I think I just lost my bet though. Kathy Oyster. The finding to extend 466 Kent their permit for another year was frustrating on several levels. There was an acknowledgement that the neighbor house was too close to this Tier 3 by several of the board members' matrices. This should be objective and in writing for all, not an opinion of the current advisory board. The noise complaint that was called into the sheriff's office was loud enough for the sheriff to knock on the door and require them to keep it down, not insignificant. The owners living in the house, in a house within the same neighborhood provided support for this extension. However, unless they are actual neighbors of this rental, this fact does not stop the noise or any other violation from being an issue. It simply means they might get to the site faster. The noise monitor placement was suspect as it turned out, it was on the farthest corner from the outdoor living space. The claim was that that was the only sheltered space. However, the whole front of the house where the deck is has an overhang, as well as a tall steeple over the front door. The program team must be involved in the placement of monitors, and it should be during a site visit. There should be objective parameters. Neighborhood comment from a man who lived in the neighborhood, just one cul-de-sac south, by the way, far closer than the owner of the property, was seemingly disregarded because his complaint was not about having heard the noise. However, he complained of sledding in the cul-de-sac and trespassing by these rental customers. In actuality, if you have a more distant neighbor standing before you, the board should look more critically at the property. Word has spread within the community that it is a problem. It's just simply not reported to the authorities. If you look at using objective standards, you may lose some of the current rentals, but for good reason. Objectivity would help the arbitrary and capricious argument that quite honestly could be applied to the permit dished out last meeting on the Kent property. Specifically because you took into account living in the neighborhood by the property owner as a positive, and you diminished the value of the neighbor who made comments as he had not heard noise.
30 seconds.
But he also lived in the neighborhood. If you make your objective standards known as soon as the new regulations pass, you should be able to institute the program in short order. So giving the commissioners direction to that end would be helpful. You're putting a tremendous amount of effort into this design, and it needs to be implemented effectively and with legal support. There's also a notion that this program is unfair and exclusive with, may I finish? With members of the permitted class potentially holding their permits for decades. In an HOA, that creates a separate class, which is problematic. Because though there is a theoretical approach that anyone can apply for a permit, the limitations and restrictions of this program in the number of permits it allows, only a few community members can hold the permit, and it can be held for the life of the homeowner and their trustees. So functionally limiting the class of residents able to partake in this income stream.
Additional opening public comment? None? Okay. Seeing none, I am going to close opening public comment. Move on to the approval of the previous minutes. For possible action, discussion to approve the draft minutes of the November 30th, 2022 meeting of the Vacation Home Rental Advisory Board. Questions, comments from the board on the minutes? Then do I have a,
I move we approve the minutes.
thank you, Keith.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Do we need to approve the agenda?
Yeah, it comes next.
Oh, thanks, okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the draft, to approve the minutes of the November 30th, 2022 meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, 4-0. Approval of the agenda for possible action. Approval of the proposed agenda. The VHR Advisory Board reserves the right to take items in a different order to accomplish business in the most efficient manner, to combine 2 or more agenda items for consideration, and to remove items from the agenda or delay discussion relating to items on the agenda. Any discussion about the agenda? It's pretty one-sided.
We're not going to reorder it.
Okay, I need a motion.
I move we approve the agenda.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Keith and a second by Michael to approve the agenda. Sensing there's no discussion, all those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
4-0, thank you. Okay, for possible action, discussion on possible changes to Chapter 20.622 of the Douglas County Code relative to VHRs in the Lake Tahoe Township. 2 weeks ago, we got through 622-020 with a few items we put in what we referred to, for those of you that weren't here, the parking lot, because they were going to be longer discussions. And we are going to get to those, but not probably today. We're going to move on, and we're going to go to .030 permit process, starting on page 81 of the packet. And the first part of that, section A, it's stricken, an owner of a vacation rental may not, and the verbiage has been changed to it is unlawful to rent a dwelling, blah, blah, blah. Does anybody have any comments on A? Okay.
Yep, hang on a second, I'm sorry.
You do?
Yeah, just, we go back to this whole thing again where there's just I don't know that the wording covers, when you say dwelling unit, we have people who have 2 dwelling units in a single family residence. So they would not be occupying the dwelling unit. I'm just concerned about the terminology, that it's not clear enough. That basically we're looking at and I can't wordsmith it today, but I just want to.
So you don't have a recommendation?
I don't, because it's just a bigger picture, and I think the standard conversation and the terminology, I'm looking more towards AJ about it, and Lauren Romaine for the record, I'm sorry, is just, this is the issue we've got. We have people with single-family residence that have 2 dwelling units. They are not occupying or living in that same dwelling unit. Somewhere in there, the terminology dwelling unit does not fit the problem. it is the zoned usage for that property, or something along those terminology. So if you have a single-family house, there should only be one group of people living together on a single-family zoned property. So when you say dwelling unit, people separate up a single family into 2 dwelling units. I don't occupy and rent this at the same time because I'm at this other dwelling unit, but it exceeds the zoning. So I'll leave it there with you, AJ, and we'll move.
So Ernie, do you want to, do we need to put that in the parking lot? So we can come back to it. Okay,
close that
so
door.
it's 030A.
Thank you.
All right, before you go on to the next one, I have a question, a point of clarification about the last one. What is the purpose of that specific number that you just were dealing with? Before you go on to the next one.
Oh,
about
what are we
owner
talking
and
about?
A.
It's the ordinance?
Yeah, can you explain the purpose of that, or what the meaning behind that? What are they trying to accomplish with that? Just to break it down for the record
really
so I can
don't
understand.
understand the question.
I don't have a packet of what you're going over, so maybe
Okay.
I can get one and I can ask specifically about that. You're referring to what number, letter?
Okay, just for the record, you're out of order.
Oh, this is not. Oh, I'm out of order. I thought you opened up for questions.
No,
I'm sorry.
no,
before
no,
you
no.
moved on. There is no questions allowed during this
Well,
portion.
it's public comment when we get finished with our discussion.
But no questions, that's the clarification, just comment.
Correct.
Okay, thank
I
you.
mean, you can ask your questions when you have public comment speaking.
Thank you.
I just didn't understand what you were asking me exactly. Okay. We have it. Moving on to number B. Does it, oh, I have hands, okay.
Okay,
Michael?
So, it's a small point, and I don't care either way, but I don't like the fact that any group, and happens to be tier 1s, are not counted in the count, not counted in the total. And there's only 11 of them, doesn't make a big difference, but I think if we're telling the public, hey, we have X number of permits out there, you should have the total number. Now, it's not a big change, but, I think it should just be out there. Now, you can say something like, because right now, you can have an unlimited number of tier 1s. You could have thousands of them, if you so be it. There will never be like that, the way it is right now, but my thinking is that once the tier 1s hit the 600 number, that they can exceed that. You can say something like that. And so just so that the number of valid permits are included in the total.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Keith?
Well, before my comment, I'd like to comment on your comment. I like tier 1s. I think they achieve the tourism benefits to the community without some of the headaches because of the owner occupancy. I would prefer to not include them in the 100, but potentially have a separate limit. Maybe that would be something we could discuss. Because, I think there may be more and more tier 1s as we tighten up regulations some other place. But I like tier 1s, and so I'm not adverse to including them in the 600. I'm also not adverse to saying that if they hit 50, we'll reconsider whether we should lower the 600. But I guess we could open it up for conversation because I like tier 1s, so that's kind of why I.
Yeah, this isn't a knock, Michael Sloan for the record, this isn't a knock on tier 1s at all. I just want tier 1s to just be counted into the total so that when we tell the public there's 550 permits issued, there really is 561, but they're not in the total.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to sway away from the tier 1s. I'm just trying to say they should just be counted, and if we get to that 600 level, then we can add something that says tier 1s are allowed to go over that 600 threshold. Whatever, it's just a reverse way of looking at it so that they're just counted.
Okay, Lauren?
Did you
Oh,
finish?
you had one
No,
other comment.
Read it.
I like to hear the conversation so I can figure out what my mind says.
Lauren Romaine for the record. I do believe that all permitted VHRs should be counted in the total. I too think that when you talk about a problem versus benefit, negative versus positive, the tier ones have less of an issue than the other ones. So, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to mitigate the problems and the issues. Tier ones are not really problematic at all. So I do think we need to foster those types of things. I'm not sure that I like saying you can go over, I think there should be some limit. So either, do we know how many tier ones we have at this?
This is Ernie Strelo for the record. We have 10.
Okay. So, I could see where we say they are part of the 600 and they can be 50 or, whatever you feel. And unfortunately right now, we don't have the time to do the studies and the deep dive that we'd like to, so we have to pick somewhere. But I think there should be, I think there should be a limit. And I don't know what that limit is.
I'm okay with including in the 600 if we're getting to a consensus quickly.
I agree with that as well, because we've had a year plus with these tiers, and if all we have is 10, I don't think we have 100 people rushing in line to get a tier 1. Michael?
With your permission, Madam Chair, I'd like to read something that might be possible for us to put in.
Language?
It's a language, so that once a VHR permits hits 600, only tier 1s, 4-person max, can be issued up to a total of 650. Now are we going to get 50 more tier 1s? No. And there's your max number. You can put in a max number, and there's other things coming down the road that I'm going to be talking about later that might impact this. But anyhow, that's what you could put a number on that.
Thank you. Mr. Strela?
Can I comment? This is Ernie Strelo for the record, just a comment. So I've been with the county 7 months and I have not had a tier 1 application come in. So I don't know what problem you're trying to fix, but put it 50 or 20 or whatever. But if you want to count in the total, that's fine, I don't care. But having like a separate 50 limit on tier 1s when you don't have tier 1s coming in is,
Okay.
Counterproductive?
I can for just a second.
Lauren?
I think it's kind of more looking forward, because as the fees get higher and as hopefully with the enforcement of it becomes more stringent, you may actually push people to want to do that type of thing. So all we're doing is setting a limit before we have to get there.
Madam Chair? And there is some nuance here, Mr. Shedd, I think, because I'm on the same way. I think there's always intended consequences and unintended consequences. I was talking earlier that as we raise permit fees, all those people who say, I have a permit because I'd like to rent it a couple weekends a year, they can't, right? Because you can't rent a couple of weekends a year at $1,000 fee, right? So that's an unintended consequence. There's fewer people who actually live here year round and rent it the 1 or 2 weeks they're not here. Unintended consequence. So there's a difference. We can include it in the number, include tier 1s. Does that mean that we include it in the density numbers or not? And so that's kind of why I was saying maybe we ought to have a separate little category and not have it in the 600 but cap them, but I am okay having them in the 600 as well. But then we got to decide whether does a tier 1 also take a permit out of the density, right? So that, to me, if we just change that, we got to figure that part out.
Yeah, right now, Mr. Strelo, are tier 1s included in the density counts?
Tier 1s are counted in our density. When we look at density,
Right.
we count that. But we don't count, okay, so you're asking if they count it in the total for a neighborhood.
Right.
They do not, right? Because we don't count it in the neighborhood. We have to, the way the code reads right now is tier 1s are not counted by neighborhood. So no, they're not. So based on what I'm hearing is they would going forward, which is fine, right? You would add a tier 1 in whatever neighborhood, and that would count towards the 15 or the 50 or whatever it is allowed in the neighborhood.
Okay. how do you want to proceed with this?
I would-
Michael, do you want to, I think we see consensus as far as wanting to include them in the number. I want to see us simplify the code, not make it more, just too many more thises and that's. So, for me, I would be great with the 600 cap, including the tier ones, and putting a period on the end of that.
Oh, okay,
But-
so you wouldn't allow tier ones above that cap, which they
Right.
are allowed now. Like if we got to that 600 tier ones, so you'd be capping off tier ones is what you'd be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So just, that's just.
This is an earnings trailer for the record, so 600 would be inclusive of all VHRs, is what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
right? So it would just count in the calculations by neighborhood the same way as a 2 and a 3 count,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
That's just my opinion. I'm just putting it out there because we're all putting our opinions out.
Yeah.
So let me hear from the rest of you. Lauren?
I think to me, it's a very small point, and I could go either way, so I'm okay with accepting what he's saying at this point and moving on.
And what's he saying?
That it's included in, the tier ones are included in the 600, and that if we get to the 600, that they can go up to 50 more. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with also putting a period after 600.
I'm okay either way too. To me, you could word it to say that they will be included in the 600. However, they could be allowed up to 30 or 50 in addition to the 600. But Lauren, I think maybe it is just easy to just cap it. It's include it in the 600 and cap it, and we can always come back.
Right.
By the way, I don't know what you guys think about this, but the federal government doesn't pass a law every single time they want to change. They have commissions and committees. And to me, this may be something, do we say, except allow no more than 600 VHR permits by the Houston Township, subject to modification by the advisory board. And then that way we give us some flexibility that if we all of a sudden got 30 or 40 tier ones, we could say, let's do something different.
I'm sticking with my period at the end of 600, but that's just, again, that's my vote if we were going to vote right now. Lauren?
I kind of think that if there is an issue that the advisory board, throughout the whole ordinance, will come back and take a look at that. So I get kind of concerned about putting it at the end of one thing. To me, it's an assumed thing. If there's an issue, it'll go to the advisory board and you change it.
But then it has to go back to the county commission.
Correct.
What I'm saying is
And
unilaterally
planning.
give us the ability to modify that 600 without going to the county commission.
Whoa.
Oh, no, okay.
Okay,
Chris?
well, I don't have.
Think of the bribes.
Okay.
Think of the free dinners.
Chris would like to.
Chris Roulette for the record. So going back to when the county commissioners put this, like the tier 1 and then the 600, their thought process was that a tier 1 is so onerous that I'm staying in my house and I have to be there the entire time the guest is that a tier 1's not going to create the problems that our tier 2s or tier 3s create, because you're limited to a max of 4 people, and as the owner, I'm there with the guest the entire time. So that's why when they said tier 1 would not be included in the 600 cap, that was their thought process behind it. I don't know if you guys knew that, but thought I'd share that.
Yeah, Lauren?
So Lauren remained for the record, so yeah, I did, and it'd be great if all of this worked the way it's supposed to, but it doesn't. And they're supposed to be there, it's only supposed to be 2, it's only supposed to be 4. And it was originally set up to only be 2, because if you have an owner there and those 2 people have another car, most places only allow 2 cars. And now it's become this larger entity. So the way it stands right now, it does have an impact, unfortunately, negatively. And I could see going in that direction if we went back to the original thought, which was I'm going to rent out a room in my house for 2 people in 1 car. But I think especially because that definition got changed and it's now 4 people and 2 cars, that it does have the same negative impact even though the person's there as the others.
I just want to clear something up. The reason that Chris is allowed to be in the discussion is he is a member of this board. He's just not sitting up here. And I know.
asked you to clarify something.
I just after having told the other fellow that he was out of line, I just thought, oh boy, this looks wrong.
I
So,
just don't know if something's synonymous.
Okay,
You guys keep talking about 600, and you're talking about density and percents. Are those synonymous?
no,
Okay.
there's a cap of 600
So you're not
VHRs
addressing
in the
density.
county. And then there's a density number in each, for single family at 15%, multifamily at 20 right now.
Right.
So those numbers have to kind of mesh together. That's why we are not at the 600 right now.
Madam Chair? I constantly listen, and I was not aware of the parking issue, that they have 2 cars. Given 2 cars, I think they ought to be in the 600 full stop period.
Good, I got a vote.
So I think we may have a consensus.
Michael?
Well, my only reasoning was to allow tier ones to go higher is because I'm trying to get, I feel the need to have more balance with smaller groups or tier ones and tier twos versus large permitted tier twos. And so later on, I'll be discussing an idea I have to accomplish that. But that's why I was trying to push over the 600 with a smaller group or a smaller tier one group.
Lauren?
But
Yeah.
Lauren, remain for the record, and I'll be right with you if we go back to what tier ones were supposed to be, and 2 people in 1 car. Then I'll be right with you to cap them at 50, and right now I'm okay with the period.
Okay, well then let's call it for now that we're kind of okay with the 600, that includes the tier ones.
Can I make one last comment? I just want to make sure we're real clear on density, because you brought up a good point. So there's 39 neighborhoods that we count in our calculations, right? There's 15 to 20% maximums for most of the neighborhoods. And there's a certain amount of plots available per neighborhood. And there is, based on the 15 or 20%, there's a certain amount of homes that are available for rental. And then we try to make sure we don't go over that number, right? Or we don't go over that number. That's the way it's written. Separately, there was a 600 unit cap added to this stuff that's not synonymous with the density of a neighborhood, right? We understand that, right? So like if you do the math, it comes out to a lot more than 600. If you were to fully fill up a neighborhood based on the densities of, I think that's
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, so let's be clear. So if you make if you count 600, let's just say that this is what you guys decided to do. You do 600, you count tier ones as part of the 600 total. You would need to make that synonymous with the neighborhood density too.
That's right.
To make it, in my mind, to make it correct, right? So in Elk's Point, if you had, and I'm making this up, 7 tier 2s and 3s, and there was no tier 1s, and then there's a couple tier 3s are given up in that neighborhood and they become tier 1s, that would count as the density of that neighborhood. Okay, I'll make sure. I just want to make sure we understood the difference.
Yep. Madam Chair, I have some comments on B.
Yes, go ahead.
Someone brought up in public comment, and it was a comment I had as well. I'd like a discussion on the ability that basically we've created 2 tiers of people, those with permits and those without, if you are capacity constrained, and not many neighborhoods are capacity restrained. But I also believe that but I don't want to use the word business, but to be in the process of allowing these, I think you need some idea that you can renew, not year by year by year by year. But I don't think it's fair that in a capacity constrained neighborhood, and let's say they're 5 over, you know that you will never be able to rent yours for years. So I think we ought to say that you have a 5-year window, that when you're first granted a permit, you have the right to renew that permit for 4 more years. But that after that 5 years, if there is a capacity constraint, you go back on the waiting list, and the waiting list can come down in that neighborhood.
Okay, did you write that down?
are we finished with the first part? Because this is a totally different realm.
Are we
Oh,
still on
Number
B?
So,
So
Okay.
that's, so
Okay.
I guess it was because of the 600, I mean, I mentioned in
Yeah.
other places. But to me, you know, the 600, and that's what I thought, the 600 is what's driving me to, we have people who can have these the rest of their ownership. And we have neighborhoods who are over capacity that I'll never be able to get one. Likewise, this is a way to get those neighborhoods below to their capacity constraints by limiting renewals to 5 years.
Okay. Lauren?
Lauren Roman for the record. So, and I was thinking, I don't know where actually it goes, that this conversation goes. You're saying it's here. I'm not sure if it isn't somewhere else.
I didn't know either, it's just not here
Yep,
anywhere.
yep.
When it's nowhere in the code, you have a
Yep.
hard time finding a place for it, and I just plugged it by the 600. I could have plugged it in renewals.
Right. And I do find it interesting because I wish I knew, do we know? Okay, so in my neighborhood, I've got a guy that wants to vacation rent, and he's very upset because he says he'll never be able to rent. And then I said, well, I don't understand that because this person doesn't rent anymore, this person doesn't rent anymore, this person doesn't rent. So to me, when I look at it, even though I'm one of those ones in those neighborhoods where people want to come and we're going to be at capacity most of the time because it's it's up by the ski slopes and stuff. So, I don't know whether there really is an issue or not, although I like what you're saying there. It's just one of those things where it is going to be a process. And the intent was never to not allow some people to and let other people do it forever. I mean, there was an assumed moving motion, in all of this. I'm not sure that we have a problem, but then maybe that wording would stop a problem.
Well, so, see, I think we don't have a problem in the majority of neighborhoods because the majority of neighborhoods aren't at capacity. If I want one, we're not at the 600. If I want one, I get one.
Right.
Where we are in the situation is if you are beyond capacity, then some of those people have to turn over. The wait list has to come down. I'm sorry. People have to give them up to even get it down to capacity density. Then there's a wait list. And so you will have some people with these for 35 years.
So you need a lottery.
And especially there's going to be a lottery anyway.
You can't
I'm
use
sorry,
a lottery.
there's going to be a lottery anyway because you can't run that like I said it. You're going to have an operational issue. But what I'm saying is, first you got to get down to capacity. When people give up their permits, first you got to get into capacity. You're going to have some people with permits for 35 years. By the way, family trust in perpetuity.
Sure.
A family trust never ends. They have theirs in perpetuity. Other people who should have the same rights as ordinary citizens can't get one. What you would have to do back to the lottery for this 5 years, and I wouldn't care if the first time was give someone a 5 to 10 year number, but you can't have if you said 5 years, you can't have a massive turnover 5 years from now. Right. So what you'd have to do is you have to allocate via lottery, and maybe it's 3 to 8 years to the current holders, and then your permit comes up. Now, by the way, if your neighborhood's not a capacity, you just renew it for another 5 years. But if your neighborhood is a capacity, you go on the waiting list.
So let's keep this on the parking lot.
Well, can we talk about a consensus whether, I don't want to put something on the parking lot, Ernie go out and develop it and say, we don't like that, we think it ought to be in perpetuity. So if we get a consensus whether this is a good idea, then we can have Ernie work on it.
Michael?
Oh, I have a question for Keith. Do you want this to be for all renewal and new permits, or just new permits going forward?
All.
Okay.
So it will be a way to bring our current neighborhoods that are over capacity down to capacity. But yes, we would go through all 500 and something permits now, give them a number, maybe 3 through 8, so everybody has at least 3 years, and that's when their automatic renewal ends. At the end of their automatic renewal, if there's a waiting list, they go on it. If there's not a waiting list, they get a new one for another 5 years.
This is Michael Sloan for the record. Are you open to higher numbers? Because I think it's a little tough on people that are renewing to, are you okay with 7 or whatever, 10 or whatever? Just
Yeah, it's concept, not dogma. I don't care if it's 10 years, 15 years. It's just not I'm stuck with perpetuity, especially with family trust. They will always have a permit the rest of their life.
Lauren? Unless they sell their house.
unless I say that's
Right, but historically, these family trusts are there because they want to preserve this thing that's in their family. It's hard to actually sell those houses because, all of a sudden you got 100 people in the family trust with a couple of generations. I don't know if you've seen some of these things.
Dang, I just lost my train of thought. Lottery scares me, and the term lottery scares me. It seems to me like there's a simple process. First of all, we've talked to people about the way in which we're going to reach the density is through attrition. I'm not sure I'm okay with changing that, but I might have to just think about this for just a little bit, because I am on board with the fact that we should put in some kind of mechanism where there are issues, where these few neighborhoods, I think there's just a couple neighborhoods that are always going to be at the top, that we should be able to shift around. And so I agree with that. And I think 5 is fine. Lottery concerns me a little bit because there's a setup time and an advertising time and all that kind of stuff. So when you don't know in advance, you take reservations and then you also need to advertise. And so I think there needs to be some kind of really set.
I'm with you. And by the way, sorry.
No, it's okay.
So I was, unfortunately, I was not verbose enough.
Okay.
So mark that down.
How was that?
But today's date, Keith Meyer, for the record even. So what I mean is, to implement this, I've been through this as a professional when all of a sudden term limits have come in, okay? And so what happens is you got a cliff. So let's say that we decided 5 or let's say 10 years. Your permit is going to be good for, once you get one, you can renew it for 10 years, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you implement that today, none of us want to be here in 2032 because 100% of your permits could expire, okay? In theory, okay?
Yeah.
The ones in the high density things are going to be the problem. Everybody else is going to be okay.
Mm.
So the lottery was simply a one-time lottery to say, we're going to implement, let's go back to 5 years. We're going to implement a 5-year allowance to renew your permit. We're going to allocate, you're going to go through a lottery and you're going to get a number between 3 and 8 today. Mm-hmm. And if you get 3 in 3 years, your permit is no longer automatically renewed. Mm-hmm. If there's space, you can renew it. If there's not space, you go on the waiting list. Some people are going to get 4 years. In 4 years, you can renew it or you go on the waiting list. Some people are going to get 5, 6, 7, 8. All it does is it evens out this rotation so that we don't have 100% turnover 5 years from now. So that lottery was just a one-time deal to get a stagger of our permits.
I get you.
It wasn't.
I get you, but at the same time, I think I'd be very upset if I was a VHR owner that just went through the whole process, paid everything, just had mine, and then I've got a trust down the street who's had theirs for however long we've had this thing now, 16 years, and they get theirs for another 8 years, and I'm getting rid of mine at 3. So what I'm saying is, why don't you just take the database and in this neighborhood, put it in chronological order, and if you have to, the first 10% or 3 years, the next 5% are 6 years, and the next 5% after that are 8 years.
Oh, I'm okay with the
because
mechanism.
in that way, the rotation. Okay.
I'm okay with any kind of mechanism Ernie wants to put in.
This was your recommendation, or not Michael's, right?
Correct. This is about the
Okay.
turnover to 600,
So
not the.
what I'd like to say is, let's come up with something that's, rather than just us going in circles, let's keep it on the parking lot, have everybody have a lot of time to think about it, revisit it at our next meeting with a few more specifics, because there's a lot more involved than
Yep.
just the numbers. There's, the density, and there's thinking about the permit holders situation. We need to make sure that it's something that is not going to create litigation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like us to be able to move on and leave it up there for now.
So we have a
Can I add to
consensus
that?
that there's something, we have a consensus that we would consider.
Well,
Okay,
we would
thank you.
consider,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
parking lots are cool.
Yeah.
Can I add, Lauren Romaine for the record, can I add to that consideration and say that I would appreciate if you two would think about what we just discussed and come back with us with a little bit more, because I don't want to make rules or ordinances that are onerous, and to find out what would work, what could work,
This
would
is
be.
Ernie for the record. We're not gonna do any of that until you guys tell us, until the code is fleshed out on what you wanna do. We haven't even gone through all the density stuff yet,
Yeah.
right? So, if this is something that you wanna practice, I don't know what to build. I wouldn't know what to build. I mean, I know what the densities are in the neighborhoods, and you're right. There's 4 or 5 neighborhoods that are at density. There is a statement in the code that allows for permits to be revoked if they don't use them over the last year. If you want to enhance that, you can do that. That's in the code today. There's, I don't know what else to build though, because it's not clear to me what you guys are
We're
wanting.
trying to accomplish the fact that these things should not, when other people want them, you shouldn't have them in perpetuity. In other words, I've got it, you want it, tough luck. Why does one person who has a permit have the right to rent that forever and other people can't?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I
please.
may, AJ Haynes for the record. It seems like a lot of this discussion concerns density more than the actual cap. And for whatever reason, our commissioners put the density section in an entirely different subsection of this code. So maybe the proper thing to do now might be to put this on the parking lot when we get to 040C, where it talks about density and the 15 and 20% density limits in the neighborhoods. That might be another time to pick it back up.
Or maybe just keep it in the parking lot, and maybe put it in the parking lot and just discuss it, and you guys know what belongs in density instead of the 600. Because like I said, it's hard for me when something's not there to figure out where it goes. To me, it's a 600 issue, but it is a density issue, because I guess you can go back on the waiting list, so I'm fine with that.
Michael?
The only thing I was gonna say, if you're gonna put in the parking lot, I'd like to remove the word 5-year, just put term, just.
Term? Just some term.
Because, I don't want to hold us into a certain number right now.
Okay. I just see this whole conversation as a lot of work for the staff people to keep track of, but maybe there's a way to make it simple, and we'll figure it out down the road. Can we move on, or do you have more? Lauren?
Lauren Romaine for the record. I guess that's what I was trying to get through to Mr. Hames and Mr. Strelo is just, you're hearing in concept what we're talking about. And so what I'd like is to just let you guys think about it a little bit. And then at the next meeting, at least, it's nothing for us to sit and talk about. You guys are the ones who understand how it could or could not be enacted. And so if what we're trying to do is something that is truly onerous, then I'd like that feedback for the next time.
And Mr. Hayden, I would tell you this. You heard Mr. Strelo say that if you take density, you're well over 600, right? So this could be an issue of the 600, not the density. So in other words, everybody may be below density, but you're at 600, so nobody, and all of a sudden you've got a waiting list of 20, 30, 40, or 50. You've got 600 people who can rent and not 601. So I understand your comment. Maybe this is more about neighborhoods, and I will tell you this. I think it's more likely to arise at the density level, but it could also arise at the 600 level.
AJ Haynes for the record, and maybe ultimately those two sections of code should be together. I don't really know why one's in 030, one's in 040. They're both talking about, limitations on how many VHRs we can have, so that's something also maybe we could consider, put those in the same place.
In your opinion, should they be under permit process or operational?
Permit process makes more sense to me, actually. Where this is currently, the 600 cap makes sense. And when I look for density, every time I go to the code, I always look here and then I go, where the heck is that stupid section? And then I always have to go dig for it in 040. I don't really know why I ended up down there.
Okay, can we move on to number C? Does anyone have any comments on 030C? Anybody? I don't have any notes on it for myself, so no? How about D? No? Okay, let's go to E. The following are the permit requirements. So we have one about a separate permit is required for each unit. They're limited to allowable uses per the property zoning designation and the county building code requirements. I'm jumping around, that's not what the whole thing says. But does anybody have comments in there? I have one comment. Michael, do you have anything?
I don't have a comment about what that says currently, but I do have a comment on what I'd like to add to it.
Okay, well, now would be the
Okay,
time.
good.
Yeah.
So, I just want food for thought from the board. One of the issues that we have, one word is called density, is you have 3 tier 2s or 2 tier 1s and 2 tier 2s and a tier 3, all in a neighborhood, all in a tightly grouped pattern. And so my idea for new permits, not renewals right now, is to have some sort of space, some sort of distance between a new permit wanting to come in if there's already 3 right in the neighborhood. And so would the board want to discuss any sort of like a radius, a 300-foot radius? I think other towns have done this, and I'd like to defer to Mr. Strelo of what he's heard, possibly.
Ernie Strelo for the record. Yeah, I've done some studies on this. So El Dorado County, the county, not the South Lake Tahoe city. So they have a 660-foot density limit. Las Vegas County, Clark County, I'm sorry, has a density limit. I believe it was 300 or 400 feet, but there is radial. Placer County, which has the highest amount of permits around the lake, doesn't have a limit. Washoe County doesn't have a limit, but that doesn't include Reno or Sparks. They have their own city limits and control it differently. Carson City doesn't have a limit. They don't actually manage it either. Carson City, the little sliver goes to the lake. And in fact, one of the townships in that, by the lake, I think wants to incorporate so they can control VHRs. So our county, we obviously don't have any density, or any circumference, radial, linear requirement today. But it's been brought up by many people that we should. So that's all I have to compare with in Nevada and around the lake. That helps.
Thank you, Mr. Strelo. Henderson has 1,000 foot.
The city.
Yeah, but it's a big city. We're a small community. So, I think we'd have to be really careful with our numbers, because with all these restrictions we're talking about, we're going to make it beyond impossible for permit holders to obtain a permit. And again, I worry about the legal side of it. Is we don't want to inundate the county with litigation. So what is your thinking, Michael, as far
Well,
as?
my thinking was that we've heard from the public before that I have so many just right in my neighborhood. If they were just spread out, or if maybe I just had 1 or 2 on my street versus 3 or 4 impacted me. And again, I'm not looking at doing anything with the existing permits, but any new permits, some sort of a radius or some sort of restriction, so that we just don't put, or maybe it's a larger tier 2, maybe, I'm going to get to this later, but I'm going to recommend different levels of tier 2s, and maybe a smaller tier 2 can go in, but not a larger one. I don't know, I just want to talk about not having big tier 2s or tier 3s bunched up.
I understand. Keith?
It makes absolute sense. Again, I'm worried about unintended consequences, because now you have density by house. So the fact that my neighbor has one means I never can. So this is tied to our rotation. If you're gonna, I'm okay with that, but you're gonna have to put a rotation system in that's for everybody. And it's gonna have to be short, because if you're gonna have a 1,000-foot rule, now no longer am I just I have a 600 cap, I've got an insti cap, and now I got a 1,000-foot cap. It is gonna be, it sounds reasonable. I don't wanna live near 3 VHRs or 10 VHRs. One of the people who came and talked about, the last one said, there's 3 in this cul-de-sac, right? And there's all these problems. So I think concentration is an issue, but then it's gonna get incredibly important that we have turnover, because the fact that my neighbor has it means I never can, is problematic for me.
And,
Well, I'm not getting a permit, don't keep thinking I'm,
Michael?
Madam Chair, may I ask, Ernie, what is the turnover rate per year? Is there a turnover rate, or has that been studied?
This is Ernie Strela for the record, I just so happen to know that. So we have a current turnover rate collectively about 22%, and a lot of the turnover is in Tahoe Village.
In what?
22%, it's in Tahoe Village. A lot of it's Tahoe
It's
Village.
in Tahoe Village.
Yeah, so when you talk about neighborhoods, there's obviously some neighborhoods that never turn.
Yeah.
And then the ski areas, they tend to turn over quite a bit. Now, the real estate market's changing, so that might change. You know, people can't sell their houses as easy as they used to, or whatever.
Yeah.
That can change it, but, you know, and to add to your density thing, yeah, El Dorado County does they do the radial distancing, and the map that they showed in one of the presentations I was in, it was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no room for any VHR, any new VHR, because I think they grandfathered in everybody, and they put radials to it. It's like if you touch any part of it touches any part of a property, it's ineligible, right, in that radius, right? So if you look at it, it's like everybody's on top of each other right now, because it's been enacted a year or two ago. So, but they don't have that rule where they don't do a turnover thing. It is what it is.
Lauren?
Lauren, remain for the record. So I cannot remember and I know you don't like me going back to the task force, but we did discuss this over and over and over, and I can try to, and I understand the issue we're trying to fix, but then there's a lot of unintended consequences. And I'm thinking about, you get up into my neighborhood where, you know, one road is above this, and then you say, well, you know, you've got a bunch of houses because, you know, we're all kind of up on the mountainside, and so that doesn't work. And then I think about, you know, this one where it's a duplex, and it can't be after a while, it's a 2 VHRs, it's in a duplex, and it's at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it's perfect because all the noise and all the problems are at the end of the cul-de-sac. And if one VHR is noisy, they're only going to affect the other VHR runners, they're not going to affect anybody full-time. So to me, I'd hate to see that go away. And so I'm feeling as though I'm not sure that it's a clear path to fix the issues we're trying to fix. And to me, I find that if we can get to where enforcement of the issues and the concerns and the problems and the parking actually is done on a regular basis, and that can then it doesn't matter. And so I'm not convinced that I understand it, and I think maybe if you were in another place where things were spread out more and you really wanted to spread it out, that it could work in some places, but I think we just have so many different residential type of neighborhoods, I'm not sure how we'd fix it. And I guess what I'd like to do is let the enforcement side and what we're putting in place work first, and then if we find it's not, then look at something more like this. But it's gonna need to be studied, and it's gonna need to be thought through, because I don't wanna do anything that just feels good. Well, that's.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Okay, there we go. Well, radius, I don't know. Mr. Ames?
Just for clarification, it didn't sound like the board had reached any kind of consensus. Is this something that anyone wants to add to the parking lot, the concept of a radius?
I guess I'll give my opinion. In theory, I like radius, but in application, I don't. And I really think the important things that need to get moved along and approved by the Planning Commission and approved by the commissioners are the things that we've been hearing from the residents and the permit holders. So, because the longer we take to get through this process, the more anger we're going to see from the residents, because we haven't fixed anything, we've only talked about it. So I would like to move on and talk about radius some other time after we get this first run done. And then we look at the things that are still creating problems after we have another year under our belt or that kind of thing. Anybody else have any?
Sound reasonable. So I have a parking lot and a back parking lot. We'll put this in the back parking lot.
This is in the garage.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
subterranean.
We don't see it, but it's there.
Yeah, Madam Chair, it could also be as part of your density, you can maybe just have, within a 300-foot radius, you can't have more than 40 people in a permit, I mean, maybe it goes backwards a different way.
And I don't have a problem with us revisiting this when we
Yeah.
get to density, but I would like to get through some of the permit process that we're going through today, because I know density is going to be loud and contentious. So we know it's out there, the radius thing, it's just, so now
Michael
let's,
had something else.
oh, Michael, did you have something?
A different subject? Are we still on ideas for permit process?
Well, yes, we are on, now you guys made me.
Right under your number 1.
Okay, yes.
Required, I guess.
I
I didn't
was-
know where else to talk about it, but.
Okay, well, yeah, go ahead, because I had something else
My
too.
question is for Mr. Strelo. When somebody applies for, say, a tier 2 or I know a tier 3, they get notified with a 300-foot radius. When somebody applies for a tier 2, does those neighbors get notified?
Ernie Strela for the record, no.
And would there be a reason why you wouldn't want that, other than the cost of the mailer for sure in time?
So Ernie Strela for the record, I'll explain what we do for tier 3 just so everybody understands what the difference is. So for tier 3, we do noticing in the newspaper. We do we agenda it, for you guys on Granicus and send that out to the public so everybody sees it. And then we require an 11 by 17 sign posted on the property 10 days prior to the hearing. And that's radial. That's around, if you're here, it's everybody around you, right? Everybody that they're supposed to get. Yeah, and then you get, and it's mailed, right? So not a perfect system, obviously, because they're kind of the way the canyon's built, but that's what we do today. For a tier 2 application comes in, it's typically a new tier 2 would come off the wait list. Like right now, we just started releasing the wait list, right? So when we start doing those, we send a note to the constituent that they're invited to apply for a new permit for tier 2 or tier 1 for that matter. And then they apply for their permit doing the normal application process. You see some of which in the tier 3 review. The parts that we're not required to do today is in the code. I think it's 1 through 9 in the permit process that you guys talk about here at the board. They generally are not affected by those pieces of it, and part of that is the noticing of the radial noticing. We don't put a newspaper ad for that. Nobody hears it, right? So typically what we do is we'll get the application, myself and Katie will go through the application, and here in the back of our mind, Keith Byer telling us about the insurance and the limits. We make sure that we're checking the insurance, the parking, renewals on parking on tier 2s and new. You typically will go out to the property and take pictures like we do with the tier 3, or I do, and I'll measure. Or if it's an existing tier 2, we'll take away the parking spots if we need to, because we didn't have a real good history of doing that in the past. And so we go through and we review that and fix it. So, and then we issue a permit to the tier 2 if it, either a renewal or a new one based on the merits of my investigation and my team. So, no, I mean, we don't, would there be an issue, I think is your question, notifying the neighbors around them, at least by mail? No, I mean, it's just, it's an added cost, and we can figure out how to make that work, if that's something you're interested in.
I guess I was thinking of the reason, because to me, tier 2 is almost perfunctory, that there's a list of criteria and you meet it. Let's say that they're not gonna come before a hearing. And again, I know you're talking about super 2s, right? But if they don't come to a meeting, would you, let's say that they notice 300 feet, and 3 people say, and is this, I don't know if this is renewal or new permit?
New only.
So new, your only comment was not in my backyard, right? That would be the only valid comment from this 300-foot radius is not in my backyard. It's a new owner, it's a new permit. So my only comment would be, I don't want to live beside a VHR, and if that's the case, we shouldn't have it. Because I don't think anybody loves being next to one.
Yeah, I mean, Ernie Strela for the record again. So, I mean, the only, if we denied the permit, we would have to document why we denied the permit, right? Because they're appealing, right? So, some people know that we've been doing a lot of appeals with the Board of Commissioners lately, right? So, so when we do, AJ and I will show up at the board chambers and do an appeal, or you guys, I guess, in this case, it would come to, and then we would just spend a couple hours going through the appeal process, and then.
But what would you expect the reason to appeal it? I mean, it's a brand new permit, so I'm not renting it now.
A brand new permit could be, if I deny a permit, any permit that's denied could be appealed.
No, but I mean, what would you be expecting from a neighbor as a reason you would deny? So we're gonna.
Oh, same thing I hear here on a tier 3, right? It would be
Tier 3
garbage,
normally
it would be,
density noise.
I don't want it in my backyard. There's garbage all over the place. I mean, some of the same comments would come out.
But it's a new permit.
No, it's a new permit.
Yeah, but he's talking about if you notice.
Yeah.
Right, but
That's
if you
what
notice a
I'm
new
explaining.
permit,
So if I notice it, and I get letters in from the public for that particular property 10 days prior to issuing a permit, I think was what you're talking to, and I get emails in from the public, right, in a certain neighborhood that's around that particular house that's gonna get, that had applied for a tier 2 permit. And they were saying
they're
that
not
this.
renting right now.
No, he is saying that they are renting. He's talking about the same thing as Lauren Romaine for the record. He's talking about tier 3s, like when tier 3s go and renew, they let them know. He's talking tier 2s to do it also for tier 2s.
That's what he's asking.
Renew.
No,
But
I
he's
just
talking
new.
about,
I just
he's talking about new permits.
I was just talking new.
My
Yeah.
apologies.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
existing, you could absolutely get that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But are you ready to notice 600 times a year?
No, that's why.
Ernie Strela for the record, I have strong opinions about any change to the current format when it comes to board reviews. But I will share that if asked, so
I'm not.
when you get to it.
So,
I can say this, tier 2 permit fees would have to go up because you have to send letters out to all those people. I mean, it would be a cost factor at some point, right?
The Ernie Strela for the record, the Board of County Commissioners has made it perfectly clear in your bylaws and in the code that the process has to pay for itself.
Right.
Right, so if there's additional heads that we have to add, we would have to come up with that money through the permit process.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lauren, let me just add, Lauren Romaine for the record, what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
Okay, I want the public to be informed if a new tier 2 comes in. We already know that they're notified if a tier 3 comes in. I just wanted the public to know if a tier 2 is going to be within a 300-foot radius of their house, and that they can react to Mr. Strelow's office and take it from there.
Lauren Romaine for the record, he's got the point there, there's no basis to make any comments. So all you would be doing is letting them know that that's happening. And then, let me just say that I think the map that the county puts together is amazingly good for that purpose. Let's say this, other purposes it's not good for. So if you had a question, you see a lot of people coming and going or whatever it is, and you have a concern, you can get on that map and say, does this place have a permit? So I think, I'm not sure that we're fixing I'm not sure what issue we're fixing.
I just think it's a good idea that the public is notified if there's going to be a change in their neighborhood, and are able to at least give comment to Mr. Strelow's office prior to a permit being issued. And these are just new permits. They already know that there's a tier 2s and 3s in their neighborhood. That's fine. They already know that.
Right.
But if a new one comes on board, then I think it'd just be good that the neighbors are aware of it.
Keith, did you have something?
Well, I think you could also, if it's just a notice, because again, if it's if they haven't been renting, it's a new owner, a new permit, and it's just a notice that, hey, by the way, this, we could do that once a month in the paper, the following permits have been issued. I just don't know if the admin, in other words, if there was something that I don't want this because I have valid complaints, you shouldn't issue the permit, I think it's a great process. I just don't know if that's a new permit. I mean, you may want to think about that for tier 2 renewals every 3 years or every 5 years or something like that. We may make it part of our rotation plan. I just don't know if a brand new permit is the right, because like I said, all you're gonna get is not in my backyard, and that's just common.
Yeah.
Ernie Strelo for the record. I have a suggestion, maybe that would help you. So we do have the owners of tier 3s post a notice on their garage or some facing the street. Without, we also notice the neighbors, but we don't have to do that. We can just have them put a notice on the garage. If that's, I'm just trying to figure out how to.
I'm gonna do it right now where no one's driving by.
I'm ready to
We're walking.
Okay, well,
So,
well,
Madam Chair.
Yes,
so
Mike.
The board right now feels like the public doesn't need to be notified if there's a
No.
tier 2 applicant. Is that what we're hearing?
I'm not saying they don't need to be
Right.
notified, I'm saying to what end? It's an additional cost, and if all the boxes have been checked and it's going to be approved, then all it's gonna do is load up his inbox that I don't want one in my backyard. So, it feels counterproductive to me.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, okay, do you have more to
Yeah,
discuss on this? Because I did want to bring up one question on number 1, and where it says property zoning designation, blah, blah, blah. Nowhere do they bring up, and I don't even know if this is something we want to talk about, but TRPA has standards for driveways and BMPs and all that kind of thing. And that's not ever specified that a VHR permit holder has to have those things, even though homeowners are supposed to have them. I guess my angst on that is when you have a very busy vacation rental, which some are and some aren't, and they're parking on a dirt driveway. And I thought there was somewhere in the code, and I couldn't find it, where they're supposed to park on a hard surface. But you get a lot of runoff, and of course the runoff goes into the lake, and it's my understanding that clarity of the lake is very important. I know it is to me. So is it in the code and I can't find it? Or is it something that we should talk about, or should we ignore it? And I'm good either way. I just,
AJ Hames for the record, the code doesn't currently require people to park on a hard surface,
see, they cheated me out of that.
not the VHR code.
Okay, thank you.
Ernie Strelo for the record, again. When we do the plot maps of each of the properties to get renewed or renew, we verify that the parking spaces now, we make sure that there's a driveway, there's 9 feet, 20 feet deep, make sure there's a 6-foot egress. As you guys have heard in some of the tier 3 meetings, some of the folks got spots taken away. They took away a spot over in Elks Point a couple weeks ago. But we go through these things, and we know what's inside the garage. We can go through the property per the code, and we can assess. So the owners, and I've talked to many of them, are not allowed to park on the dirt. Dirt is not a parking spot, right?
That's all I need to hear.
That's how we approach it. The code doesn't specifically say that, but even a slab of cement, we took away a parking spot because it's not a parking spot.
No, then I'm retracting.
On the renewals and the new
I'm
ones.
retracting my comments. Lauren?
Lauren remained for the record. So, Mickey, I know, because I've been with you for these years, that it is it's a hot button for you. I mean, it's great that Ernie and the gang is interpreting it that way right now, but if you, to me, you're writing ordinance for people, if there's turnover or whatever, if you you know, it's a simple thing. All parking must be done on a hard surface. I mean, every one of these is in Tahoe TRPA.
I guess where I saw it in here once, but it's not in this version. I saw it in here because it's something I look for, like you look for trash. Keith?
Didn't we have off-site parking one time that was up the road? Was that paved as well? I thought it was a dirt thing inside of some. Do you remember? I can't remember. It was a tier 3, and they had off-site parking. That was paved as well? Okay, that was not paved. Okay.
No, Ernie's trailer for rent, that wasn't paved, that was, I think the Tier 3 recipient said that they used that for parking, and it was, I don't know if it was forest land or what it was, but I don't know if you approved or denied that one.
I can't remember that. They all kind of blend
So-
together.
That wouldn't have, now they can do off-site, like if they want to Uber in from the casino or something, you know, some sort of off-site parking.
Lauren Romaine for the record. So the only other thing I'm thinking about, because when this did come up before, is that there are some places in Glenbrook that I think are dirt, and I don't know why. Would they be grandfathered in as dirt? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Ernie's trailer for the record.
Yeah.
So there's like 5 different neighborhoods now in Glenbrook. We added one. I think that's not part of the HOA, right? That's like one of the 80 spots that the Commissioner Tarkanian brought up. So we separated that out. Those are the older properties that were pre-HOA, and they are dirt. I've been out there. There's some of the roads are even dirt, you know. So I'm not aware of. I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any recent Tier 2 renewals or new permits for those areas where I've gone out there and looked at those. I've been in the other parts of the gated community that's part of the HOA, the Glenbrook HOA Association.
Oh.
Well, then let's do this. When we get to parking, because there's a lot of parking in here,
Probably 5F.
I will bring up to add the words solid surface or whatever words you want to use.
Madam Chair,
Now,
is it more broad? I mean, I thought you were headed for something more broad than that. You can be grandfathered under TRPA and not have to meet new TRPA requirements, right? In Glenbrook, there are places with, you know, they have some really weird things in Glenbrook because those houses have been there way before TRPA. Was your point more broad? Was it specifically only paved parking, or were you trying to say that when you apply for a VHR permit, because you're now supporting tourism, that you have to comply with the current TRPA code? Is it more broad, or was it only paved parking?
for me, it's paved parking because TRPA has made it clear that they really don't want to participate in this program. So I don't want to get into the weeds with TRPA and their issues.
Okay.
Okay.
One more thing to that, Ernie's trailer for the record. So in the code allows myself, my team to make the decision to make modifications to permits based on the conditions of the roads and the driveways.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Madam
So
Chair, I have comments on E1 as well.
comments on number 1?
E1, yeah.
E1, okay, go ahead, Keith.
First of all, I just want to see how we're doing things. Is any change, do we have the ownership of every LLC? And is any change of an LLC a change of owner, therefore the permit does not transfer, or is it only 50%? Do we actually dig into the owners in LLC? So, and is it any change to an LLC results in new ownership? And so we don't need to include that, that's already there.
Ernie's trailer for the record. So LLCs and corps, we have to have percentage information. It used to be required. We ask for all the paperwork now to show the amount of who owns it and what's the interest of the ownership, because it's supposed to be closely held. So we have to understand how it's closely held. If it changes, then they can lose their permit. The trust is a little different, as you talked to earlier.
Yeah, okay. My other comment, there are always unintended consequences. And I have seen a situation, Keith Meyer for the record, where I believed they had taken the rights of ownership away from a property without changing the ownership of the property, which you can do with a management company. Okay, so I have a property stays in there. I want to bring in some partners. I can't bring in the partners to that property or I'm going to lose my permit. Instead, I put a management company on top of it. The management company loans me money for the property value, okay? And through management fees, we equalize the earnings from that property. Okay, I'll tell you later which one I think it was. Now, I think we should have something, but if this is a bridge too far. But I think, again, when you talk about unintended consequences, when I have a permit that if I sell you part of my property, I'm gonna lose it, and these permits are valuable, less valuable if they rotate every 5 years. That's possible. But is that something we want to attack? That you cannot included in this change of ownership are management agreements that have de facto moved the benefits of ownership to the management company. Okay, let's just skip this one. I think,
That's great.
This is Ernie Stradlow for the record. Actually, I have a question, just so I understand it.
Yep.
Is it changed? So typically, if it's something that we see changed on the assessor side,
okay, now, Lauren owns a VHR. I still want to do this, but I need cash. I'm going to sell my house. And I'm like, you know what, Lauren? Don't do that. You need cash? I'm going to give it to you. Okay? In fact, we're gonna go in, and I'm going to give you a loan. We're going to create a management company, and I'm going to have that management company. I'm going to give it money. It's going to give you a personal loan. You're not going to change anything on your program. But now, I get 100% of your. I get 100% of your rentals as my management fee, and the management company's going to pay all the benefits, pay all the things. So what I've done is Lauren has not sold her VHR, but she and I now have a company where we're splitting the profits of that VHR. And I can, like I said, later on where I don't commit libel, I'll tell you where I think it happened.
Who thinks of those things?
Me, for a living.
Michael.
Okay, so, and the sad part about
I
it
do
is
this
I
for a
was
living.
actually thinking similar things about that Keith was. But the one flaw to that scenario, I believe, is that under the county recorders, they're not an owner.
That's correct.
And so that's the flaw. I mean, they don't have any recourse. Hey, I'm an owner. No, you're not an owner. You just have a business contract with, the current owner.
So
In your scenario that
okay,
you
so
just said.
Lauren and I create a management company above her property. She keeps her property in her name.
She is the only owner.
Okay, yep, and she pledges that property to the management company. Pledges, not moves ownership, pledges the property to me. I now have I have a pledge of that property up in my thing, and I run it just like we all own it. I'm sorry, maybe I'm just too devious.
No.
But again, like I said, Ernie, after you're not part of the committee, you're not a voting member. After this meeting, I'll tell you where I think it
Oh,
happened.
wait,
Okay, Michael.
Warren, if I may,
Yeah,
because
go
this is still part of this theme here. One of the ideas that I had, and so far I'm 0 for 2, is to.
Don't keep count, it's not good.
Yeah, that's right, is to make all new permits, you must have hold title in the same name for 2 years before you get a permit. And what I'm trying to do here is stop REITs and investors from coming in and buying up property. And I don't know if it's legal or not, but there's an idea that you just, for some time period, it has to be under, the county recorder's name, just in that entity. Go ahead.
Lauren?
Lauren, remain for the record. I'm sorry, but I gotta go back to what he was talking about. So what is your solution to this perplexing
Yeah, you put a
problem that you
conceptual
just-
thing. You put a conceptual thing in that the benefits of ownership must go to the owner and cannot be transferred to any other entity.
Can we add that? Because I would be on board.
how would you police that?
If it
You
becomes
don't.
obvious.
You find it, and it gives you the hook that when you find it, you can enforce it. It's kind of like the one where we denied a permit and we came back and said, well, you know what, there was a loophole, this was before. In other words, today I can walk in and say, Lauren still owns her property, you can't take the permit, that's what your code says, but I've sucked all of the benefits of ownership into another company. I've had that pledge of that asset, I've given her money for that asset, I have done everything legally. She has no rights of ownership at all, except that she still owns it, and you can't possibly take my permit. So what it does, it allows you that when you find it, you will not police it at all. When you find it, you can enforce it. Okay?
That's you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
AJ Haynes from the DA's office for the record. So the concern that I understand is, I think the reason, as I understand the code, the reason that the permits were not transferable is because there's some amount of vetting that goes into an owner before the permit issues. So there's also liability reasons. If there is a problem, the permit's been issued to this person, that's the person that we're gonna go after. And so I think that is why they're not, part of why at least they're
No,
not
that is,
transferable.
no, not at all. The permit, the reason is that when I have one of these permits in perpetuity, you've now given me an asset other people don't have. So I've got two identical, I've got a duplex. One side has a VHR permit, one side doesn't. The VHR permit side is worth more than the non-VHR side. Because these things are limited value, we are creating value of these permits. And by allowing them to transfer, you've given me an asset that other people can't get.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna sell my house with that permit if I possibly can.
I guess I'm just trying to understand from the county's perspective why that matters that much. It seems like that's beneficial maybe for whoever has the VHR permit. They could sort of
Oh, absolutely.
use it to their benefit by coming up with these crafty ways to transfer, you know, the running of the property. But from the county's perspective, the code is designed to ensure that, you know, neighbors aren't disturbed and things like that, that TOT is paid, and those are the county's concerns. And so I think the code is designed mainly to address those issues, which is why, you know, we don't want Bob to transfer his permit to Jane because we don't know Jane and we don't know if she's
But
someone
except for
who-
tier 3, you wouldn't have any ability to prevent Jane because you don't know Jane. So if it's not tier 3, and Jane meets all the requirements, she get a permit. I mean, no, the reason they're not transferable is that you have unilaterally created something of value and given it to somebody in perpetuity. These 600 houses are worth more than the other 3,000 houses because these 600 have the ability to rent. And if you're an investor, you can't buy that one.
Yeah,
You can't rent it. You can rent mine tomorrow. It's transferable.
Yeah, AJ Haynes to the record. I understand that point. I understand that the code, from that perspective, has created a difference in value amongst properties. But in reviewing and listening to all the discussions that went into this code, I think the Board of County Commissioners' concern was when something goes wrong, who do we go after? We want to know who these people are. We want to approve them. And we don't want them just transferring these things without oversight.
I
And
disagree
so,
with that.
although this is a concern, my understanding of how this code was drafted and its history is that that wasn't the consideration for why permits should not be transferred.
Okay, Lauren.
Lauren, remain for the record. So it's really weird because the conversation we just had about 605 years was all about the fact that one person holds on to this ability and some owners have it and some don't, which I believe is opening the county up for lawsuits because you allow one person to do it indiscriminately and another one not to. So it's funny how we talked about it there, but when we're talking about it here, I mean, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here listening to this going, that's a fantastic idea, you know? And so why wouldn't I do that? And the other people were hurting by when we identify a problem like this and not addressing it in a very simple sentence that will allow you to stop it when you find it, not to say you have to go out and look for it, but when it becomes an issue and obvious, you're like, well, there it is, we've got to stop this. Are all these people on the wait list? I mean, if this word gets out and it really is something, you got a lawyer and he says, yeah, I'll draft up this paperwork for you, no problem. And you've got your cash and you can go to Tahiti and I'll be back here and I'll stay here, but you'll be the owner. Then all these people on the wait list are never going to be able to get there because that place is still being held,
So-
but not by the same owner.
Can I ask, is there a sentence then?
Yeah.
He did, he said it.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Retain the benefits of ownership, I think is what you had said.
Yes.
yes, yeah, and Mr. Hames, I'm sorry, I was probably rude and I cut you off and I apologize for that. Keith Byer for the record, so I apologize. I don't believe the purpose of non-transferability was so that we knew who the new owners were. Because you could know who the, in a tier 2, we have a list of requirements. And it has nothing to do with how good an owner you are, right? You own it. So I don't believe it was about we ought to know who the new owner is, all that's a side effect. The primary purpose was not creating a transferable asset. I believe that was the fundamental reason. So my sentence would be is that the benefits of ownership must be with the property owner and cannot be transferred to another entity.
It's that simple.
Okay. So put it on the list. Chris?
That, what Keith, sorry, Chris, for the record, what Keith said is true. It was designed so that it wasn't a sellable commodity, so that you can take your vacation home. Lauren, her home's not worth more because she's selling it with a VHR permit.
And what I just want to say is when we redid the ordinance with the settlement from the litigation, that not transferable words were not in there. And I was having a back and forth with Mr. Ritchie about it. And he was exasperated with me because it was about LLCs and corporations. And finally he said, if I add these 2 words, not transferable, will you be happy? I said, yes, I will be happy. So, you know, I get where they were coming from, and this whole new caveat, I guess I don't have the devious mind.
I know.
But you're a risk assessment person, so, or whatever, you know. So I get it, and I love that we all have different places we're coming from.
Let me just tell you what I see. I have seen management companies bespoke. Why?
Okay, yeah, no, I
So,
see. Okay,
Madam Chair, if I just may jump in real quick. I was never disagreeing with it. I'm not trying to insert my opinion
Okay.
because I'm not even on the board. But I just wanted to make sure I understood the principle that was trying to be achieved, so that if there's a consensus on this item, that I encapsulate it correctly and can propose it in a way that you all intended.
Yeah.
So I was not trying to argue or disagree.
Arguing's okay.
Just trying to make sure I understood.
Madam Chair, if you could disagree with me, I appreciate it.
Well, it's not my place to disagree.
I would
I'm not
love
a
your
board
advice
member.
and counsel.
All
I
right.
think that's why you're here.
Put the
So if you
sentence
disagree,
in.
please state
yeah,
it.
put the sentence in, and it makes everybody happy. Let's move on. Is there anything else on
Well,
number 1?
Yes.
Madam Chair, we didn't get to my third strikeout yet.
Oh, well, give me
You
your
know,
third.
I want some sort of, I'd like to see some sort of language that, you know, that a new permit cannot gain, that a new applicant cannot gain a permit unless the entity is listed under the same name for a certain amount of time, 1 year, 2 years, whatever. I'm just trying to keep REITs and just strictly investors from coming in.
Okay. Lauren?
Lauren Romaine, for the record, I would agree in 1 year. I would be okay with 1 year.
Chris?
Does the closely held part of this already do that, so that a REIT can't do it because REITs aren't closely held?
Reads?
REITs, real estate investment.
Right, trusts and investors, and
Those aren't
everything has to
closely
be
held.
closely held. Right, you're right. They've made that verbiage change in the LLCs and all that. And you do check those documents, Ernie, to make sure they're all either one family. I think it has to be with one family or under one roof or something like that.
Sorry, Chris Ronald.
Chris.
The county does have something similar for like if you do an owner-builder permit to work on your house, I'm allowed to pull a permit as an owner and work on my house. stating that I'm not gonna sell the house for at least a year, and that I'm not renting it for at least a year, whatever that language is, I don't know exactly, but it is on their owner builder application, saying that it's the primary purpose is for me to live in it. So you could, I mean, it kind of makes sense with other things they've done.
Yeah, this is already straight up for the record. You guys have called me several times on those week long permits, the VHR permits, right? Because of that verbiage, right? We don't hold them open.
Okay,
Well, yeah, I was gonna-
so do we need to add the
Mhm.
verbiage of 1 year then? Or is that the consensus that
That'd be fine.
you want to have the same
Why wouldn't
owner
you
for
go
1
that
year? So you don't want,
A property.
so I can't buy a property tomorrow and apply for a VHR permit, correct? I have to wait a
That's-
year.
That's what I was just trying to get at. I was
Mhm.
just trying to make it so that you're just not coming in to buy a rental here,
And-
a short-term rental here in Douglas County.
And there are examples of that in other communities where you have to own the house for 1 year or some amount of time before you can apply for a
And
permit.
I'm certainly not saying you can't come in and speculate and just buy houses and then in a year or whatever, then you have a house, but you certainly can't gain short-term income. Basically, what you would be doing is renting to long-term. If you're going to go down that road, and guess what we need? Long-term rentals.
Mhm.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Keith Fire for the record, Mike. I hear you. My libertarian streak just has a guttural reaction to using this to create something you want. I've got an asset and you've decided that you want long-term rentals. And so you're making it hard for me to do something so that you get what you want. There's just a certain amount of property ownership rights that I got it, I paid for it, it's mine. Don't make me provide something that you need by confiscating part of my rights. However, it's one of those things
The
that,
VHR permit is not
yeah,
guarantee.
it's not a right,
It's not a
okay, a
right.
wrong statement, but you have, you want something and you're taking my property. It's different saying that I can't rent it out, but now, and it's just the flip side of the coin, you're now saying you really want long-term rentals, and so this is a way to get it from my property.
I shouldn't have said that.
Let me,
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't have said it that way.
Lo-
I really do want just the person to own it. Go ahead, Lauren.
Lauren, remain for the record, just for clarification, I mean, the main point, I think,
Yes.
from your, is that you don't want investors running in here, throwing it on some of these management companies that don't care about our, all that stuff that we see when you just buy a property and you rent it, and then you own another one here and another one there. That's the main purpose. Then I think your secondary afterthought is, then there's a year's worth of long-term renting.
I retract that statement, Madam Chair.
Okay, now, I can, Mr. Strelo, Mr. Strelo, so here's my quandary, and perhaps you can answer this question. We now have 60, 70 cases of complaints. I believe that we were trying to protect residents from noise. Do we have any indication that investors cause more noise than non-investors? Do we believe that non-resident owners cause more noise than resident owners? Is there anything we can glean from the complaints we've had that define what kind of ownership produces more or less than their pro rata share?
Bernie Strelo for the record, this is within the VHR. Yeah, I mean, we don't record it that way, so it's not like a pivot table. So it's a investigation we'd have to do. Now, it's a good question. And it piques my interest, so it would be something that, we can talk and.
Yeah, because
I
if we,
think you and I have talked a
we,
little bit.
we, yeah, we ought to have lunch with these guys, 'cause-
Now it sounds like I start to understand what you're looking at. So, yeah, we can, I have to see how the data, how easy it is to look at that kind of data, because it's not, we record it by address.
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And a VHR, so, we don't get into that kind of detail, what kind of ownership structure there is.
Yeah, because I guess what my comment is, I gotta believe they cause more problems. Because they don't live here, they never intended to live here, they're maximizing revenues first and foremost. Where a resident owner has to see me in Safeway, right? So in general, I'm with you. If the data showed that non-resident owners have a higher proportion of complaints, I'm all over it. So I will be part of your consensus for today, but I would, as more information comes to light, I, as always, reserve my right to completely change my mind. Keith Meyer for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. Obviously, an investor is going to have more continuous rentals than somebody that is renting their home because they want to come and visit a couple times a year. So, that seems logical to me. Are we moving on?
Madam Chair, can I just tell you a conversation? I had it with Michael only, so we did not violate law. I had a guest who, his business model is not in Douglas County,
Okay.
to rent apartments and houses and VHR them, okay? And what he said was, there's unintended consequences. All of his are more valuable, because as they raised permit fees and as it became more burdensome in regulation, all the people who rented their house for a couple of times a year can't do it. They can't pay the fees, so they have pushed those people out of the market. So, when we have this idea that people live here and just want to rent it out for a couple of months, that's becoming more and more infrequent. And I think a lot of the times when people say that, I'm not going to say they're disingenuous, but there's going to be fewer and fewer and fewer of those as this gets harder and harder and more expensive. Those people are going to be pushed out of the market, and we will be left with the people who are in it 100% of the time to rent these things. So that's one of those unintended consequences of all this legislation. We are creating a professional market for people to rent things out 100% as much as they possibly can.
And I don't disagree with you.
Okay, yeah.
I've heard a lot of complaints from permit holders about the fees. And, the fees have to pay for the program.
For this guy.
For that.
Lauren?
I'm sorry, did we put that under, Lauren Remy for the record, did we put that to rest? We're good? Are we good? What are we doing with it?
Yeah, I support that as a consensus for us to move forward with it,
Okay.
but I reserve the right to change my mind when
Okay.
we vote.
So is it on?
There we go.
No, for him to add it to the ordinance.
Okay.
We're dealing with the 1 year
Yeah.
requirement? Okay.
I think 1 year.
Okay, moving on.
No.
Well, just moving on
Oh.
to another subject, right?
No,
Still?
no, I
With
haven't
the
had
1
mine.
year?
I haven't had.
You're still on the 1 year?
No, I'm on to another subject. It's still
subject.
paragraph.
Okay,
Same paragraph.
paragraph one, that's
Okay,
fine.
so it's just an overall conversation, and in Mr. Hames, it's more towards in your wheelhouse. But the last sentence in there, VHR permits are limited to allowable uses per property zoning designation. This is what I'm talking about. I don't think it is spelled out well enough. I don't think it's spelled out well enough for the fire department when they go and do these things to ensure when I'm looking at a single family residence and there's a whole locked off section. I mean, that's what the intent of this was to stop people from separating up their zoned single family or their zoned duplex into a quad. And so I just need to say, we got close to fixing it, and the county's building code requirement. So that sentence in there may need to be beefed up somehow to explain that it is, that whatever, you have a single family home, that means one group of people living in that single family home. You have a duplex, it's two separate groups. You have a quad, it's 4. You can't have a duplex with 4 separate living areas. And then the other part to that is kind of spread out all over the place is this paragraph 3, where each VHR must be a permanent habitable dwelling unit. So the issue we were trying to fix there was, I mean, an example I have, there's a duplex. They built stairs down the side. They made a non-permitted area on both sides of their building. So they have an A, B, a C, and a D. C and a D is not a 911 address. It's not noted. It's a duplex. It's not a quad. And they're not, the reason they don't, we can't get HOA dues off of it is because it's not it's a ADU, which I see that up there and it drives me crazy. So it's not a full residential dwelling. And then what really drives me crazy is in the reviews, they talk about how the heat is taken care of by the upstairs unit, and then there's space heaters in the lower unit to keep the heat going, but that's because none of
Okay,
this is,
so do
okay,
you-
so I need that to somehow, we need to put it together in a cohesive sentence, in a cohesive place. And then I also added, and I know you had it in another place there, where owners and or their guests may either occupy or vacation rent their homes, but may not do both at the same time. So
It's in there.
I know, and it's all scattered in different places, and it's not, in my opinion, it's not clear enough to be followed appropriately. So I'm just looking for more clarity, more straightforwardness, more consistency, more understanding of the problems we're trying to fix.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, AJ had I'm sorry,
Just to your point, AJ Haynes for the record, I think the requirement that you not occupy and rent at the same time, I think that was added just to tier 3s. So that is where it's in the code that's here with the revisions. I think that was just a tier 3 revision.
needs to be an all revision.
So what I'm understanding you're saying is part of what you're proposing here is you would like to see a requirement for all tier 2s and 3s.
All VHRs,
Well, tier 1 you would have to be present.
correct, okay?
For a tier 2 or 3, that if you have a single family home
You just can't exceed your zoning designation.
and you're renting it to a group, you can't be there. Or
No.
if you have a,
And see, this is where it's going to be really clear. Okay, so I have a duplex. I have a VHR permit for one of my sides, okay? I decide I'm going to chop that one up, and I'm going to live in that half, and I'll rent out the other half. So now I have basically a triplex.
yeah.
Okay, so we can't do that. I'm sorry, I missed what you said. Oh, but you can't say that the owner can't occupy, because what happens is, oh, I give it to my friends. I'm not there. The point is, when you have a duplex, there's 2 groups of people. Not 3, not 4, not in one instance where we had a fire in a duplex had 5 units. It is, we need to somehow really say that there's, you know, in a single family, it's one group of people living within shared spaces within that single family. Because maybe I'm not gonna occupy it, but I could have my friends come up and occupy it, and that's still just as bad.
Chris wants to.
Yes.
So Chris Roulette for the record, I understand what you're talking about. I think the best way to fix that and address that issue isn't necessarily with, so I'm gonna give my opinion, sorry.
I think you're a board member.
You're just a non-voter. You can, yes, you're
Isn't
allowed.
necessarily through this means, I think that's a zoning and planning issue and a building department issue. If zoning and planning says no to that, like you're not allowed to rezone that, then the issue's settled. If zoning and planning says yes, you can, then it becomes building to make sure it's safe. Does that make sense? It sounds to me like it's a zoning issue that you're worried about.
Believe me, I've
I
been
know you
sitting
fought
talking
this
with, yes, and I've been fighting this for how many years now? So within the VHR ordinance, I think is the only place we're gonna be able to get what we need to get, because right now, the VHR ordinance, and in other cases too, because some of this is a long-term resident issue also, but we can at least address it in the VHRs. I mean, people want to talk about, I have my rights, I don't erode my rights. Okay, fine. Well, your right is a single family. That's what you're zoned. So you have one group of people living together. Your right is not to divide up a single family home into two separate living areas. So we got to understand that it's really incentivized, especially in the VHR community, to do this kind of thing. And that we need to put something close in here that stops people from doing it.
What would your sentence be for that? How would you verbalize that?
I can take a shot if you'd like.
Yeah.
Lauren, here's what I think I'm hearing you say. Home rental unit should be uppercase, should be a defined term. Now, I know we're past definitions, but we can do that. And we ought to define home rental unit as a single family home with
That's good. Yeah.
with that we're sharing all sharing living spaces. And we can work on that definition, but that's what I'm hearing, is that we shouldn't use home rental unit as lowercase. We should define home rental unit as a defined term that we can put more words around about what that means. That it is a single family home and all common areas are shared by all residents. So if you want to live with me, I can have a lock off and that's okay. But I can't, you have your living room and I have my living room, you have your kitchen and I have a hot plate. Right, that's what I think, that's, we're kind of, okay? So that, so it's a single family house and all common areas are shared by all residents.
And that covers your tier ones then as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lauren, I just have a question for you. On this scenario you've been painting, what does the assessor's page call this?
Oh, don't ask me that. So the assessor goes out and looks at it and says, oh, I think there's 3 units in there. So the assessor says there's 3 units. And then I ask the assessor if they'll go to planning and if they will tell planning that they see 3 units in a duplex. And they say no, because it's too dangerous for our guys to go out there and we don't want to make it more dangerous. So this triplex or this quad has never gone through planning.
Okay.
There's no communication. So just because the assessors, I just want to be clear about it because I'm sorry, it's really irritating. It's just been, so the assessor's page, if you go there, will say it's a quad.
Okay,
But-
thank you, because the reason I was asking
Okay.
wasn't
Yes.
for that, was that is there an easy fix?
No.
Of putting in the word of what the assessor's page
No.
says? And now you're saying no in this, which I hope is a very, an instance that's not very usual.
It's very usual.
I think for us, though, I think for us, we could say that if you're taking a duplex and making it a threeplex, and now like there's a clear change in the assessor from 2 to 3, Mr. Stroiler's office, Ernie's office could say, oh, well, that's a change in zoning. That has to go through planning, and before that gets approved, for you to have a VHR permit, planning has to approve that.
Yes, and that would be, I mean, you're talking steps in the right direction in my estimation, but let me just throw the last gink into this whole thing. And that is the sentence that says, each VHR must be a permanent habitable dwelling unit, because as we see, you have a single family zoned place, right? That has 3 dwelling units, 3 residential units, right? And so we go in, the county goes in and says, just take out those full fridges and you're good. Didn't change how many people stay there, didn't change how long they stay there, didn't change the drain on the resources whatsoever. So the other part to that had to be added during the task force stuff was this permanent habitable dwelling unit, because then you can't rent it out. However, then you have the issue of, okay, I've got this permanent habitable dwelling section, I'm going to live in the place with the hot plate. And people do. They do for a long period of time. And so what we need to do is stop these abuses, and I just need to see it all the little holes and loopholes need to kind of be put in one paragraph so that we can then, owners have the right to rent, but you don't have the right to exploit.
Okay, so I think
Done?
we need to come back to this, or, because I don't think that verbiage works.
And I think Mr. Hames will be.
for the ordinance.
Mr. Hames, you can call me.
Because we have to move on.
Yes.
Because we're on, this is,
Madam Chair, can we take a break?
yes, that's what I was gonna suggest, that we take a quick break and, like, come back at like 10 minutes enough? 3? Because I wanna remind everybody, we only have this room
Right.
until, we have to be out of here at 4, because there's a 4:30 meeting.
Oh.
So.
I only have 7 more comments on E1. I'm down to 2 by the time we get to E2.
We might finish you up.
Okay, I'm gonna, is this turned off so I can vent? I'm glad you're here, Kirk. It sounds like you need a long list of things to go over in planning.
too, so but, there's a big difference, I forgot what I was gonna say.
Sorry to do
Sorry.
That wasn't my choice.
I could read them without my glasses.
Okay, are we ready?
No.
Let's see if we can get
Let's get through two more words.
The higher the rates go, the more I read. So
Okay,
it's
I'm
like, we
gonna
gotta,
call the meeting back to order.
Pick that up here.
And all four of us are present.
oh, I've got that on speed dial.
So let's go forward. Which word are we on? We are on, were we finished with E1? Or was there more on E1? No? So E2, there's an obvious mistake with that date.
Yeah, and AJ Hames, for the record from the DA's office, I don't know why it says December 31st, 2031. I wonder if the 31 just got copied over. It's supposed to be 2024. So that, the code does not say 2031. That's just a typo in this,
Right.
in this draft. So you, the board can ignore that.
Ernest, it's October 1st.
Oh, and
2024.
it's not even December.
So, yeah, because
Yeah.
we've already got staff already to go on that.
So it's, I don't know how it says December 31st, 2031, but we can just ignore that.
Thank you. Any other comments on number 2? Number 3, the permanent habitable dwelling unit, I think we discussed. Is there anything more on that one? Number 4, anything? I'm just gonna read off these numbers, so if you guys just, number
It's
5.
like bingo.
Number 5, we've just got a red line on property may be advertised or rented. A permit must be issued before the property may be advertised or rented. Then there's an A, B, C.
Bingo.
Okay.
Keith Barr for the record. This is gonna be more important perhaps later, but B, the name, address, telephone number of the owner in the vacation rental. We, at some point, tier 3s, we've already had the issue, are you really a Douglas County resident? And I think all the county can do is look at your driver's license. You can look at utility bills, but if I own the house, all those things are gonna come to me anyway. None of those things mean I really reside here. Is there, like, I have to be a resident of Douglas County to sit on this board, and I could lose that. In fact, I have a second home in Florida, and I make sure that I'm here the majority of the year. But I don't know if I have to. Is there something, in other words, when we talk about your, being a local owner, a resident of Douglas County, is that simply from B, my name and address, or is there some day requirement? Do you understand the question? In other words, can I be a resident of Douglas County never having spent a day here because I own a house here and I have a driver's license and you think about it, I got a utility bill in my name, I got a mortgage in my name, I've gone to the DMV and I got a driver's license with that address on it, but I haven't lived here and registered to vote because I want to avoid taxes. Is B determining residency for tier 3s, but I'm also going to come talk to you about tier 2s.
Ernie Strehler, for the record, I assume you're asking me.
Yes,
My team does them. So for, I'm trying to think here. So for tier 2 and 1, and actually 3s are just enhanced tier 2s. The information, so they fill out the application, they list what their mailing address is and where they reside on the application. They give us a driver's license that we match up to their address. It doesn't necessarily prove that you live here still. It could be you moved to Florida, like you said you did.
No, I did not.
We have, well, I'm sorry.
I could have.
I shouldn't have said it.
I want to.
My apologies. Trying to think, we have, like the insurance documents that have, where the owner resides and then the insured property. So we do some incidental matching. I guess you can, we don't really do a forensic audit on somebody's address beyond that.
It's kind of in the same category of, I'd just like to have a rule that people may violate, and if we become aware they violate it, we could do something about it. Is there anywhere in county code which says a local resident, our tier 3 already talks about local residents don't have to have an owner manager. So your residency, right, is already in the code in tier 3. I'm going to talk about it in a few other places and 15 meetings away from here going one at a time. Is there anything in county code that says I have to live here 186 days a year to be a resident of Douglas County? I'm not saying we would enforce it, I'm not saying we forensically investigate it, but if it turns out this person hasn't been here in 2 years, they're not a resident.
AJ Hames from the Douglas County DA's office. The code doesn't say anything about timing that I'm aware of, and how long you live here to be a resident. I don't think that's addressed anywhere in the code. The only place it's addressed here is, as you stated, in the tier 3 portion of the code, where it states that resident owners can manage their properties without utilizing a property manager, but it does not specify what a resident is, and I don't think that there's any other area of code we can rely on to interpret resident. I think if this board wanted to define resident, I think that within the tier 3 section would probably be the most sensible place to do that, as I don't think it's required.
Well, my problem with that is I have some potential changes to tier 2 about residency.
So we're looking for whether this is your primary residence.
Right, and I believe that's what the tier 3. So let's consider it just for tier 3, and we'll talk about tier 2 later. For a tier 3, and we say resident, it is their primary residence.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say there's a lot of honor system in the world, and with this being a primary resident from an IRS code, that's one thing, and that's where the 300 whatever number 181 days comes in. And I know to run for an office, you have to have lived in the neighborhood for X number of days. But I don't know that if it's our duty to define that word unless it's specific to VHRs.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, AJ Hames from the DA's office for the record. It sounds like there is one place so far in the code where this board and the county staff are assessed with determining whether someone is a resident, and that's when they're a tier 3 owner that manages their own property. And so just looking at the code as it is right now, I think it could be valuable to define resident. Now, if the board was also considering making other changes to the code where being a resident would be relevant, and there's a rationale for doing that, then it might be worthwhile to add a permit requirement here, maybe a new subsection C, just ahead of the current subsection C, that requires the applicant to declare whether they are a Douglas County resident, and then prescribes the type of proof that would be required in order to establish residency, or a time frame that would need to be, something like this board could decide what a resident is, but perhaps that would best be inserted, if it is going to be applied to other areas besides tier 3s, maybe that would best be inserted just after subsection B as a new subsection C.
So would it be under definitions?
It could also be, it just depends on if you want to include it here as a requirement of the permit, which is what we're discussing now, that in the permit you have to say declare your residency, then you could add it here. Or you could add it here as a permit requirement and then go back to definitions and add a new definition of resident there. That would also work.
So if we can reach a consensus, I'd like to hear what you have to say, but if we can reach a consensus that it's important we have something that is determined by you're a resident, but we've never defined what resident means. And so I think we ought to define what resident means. If we can reach a consensus there, we can leave it to you guys about where to put it and where it all goes.
Sure.
But I'd like to hear what,
Right.
maybe I'm,
Lauren Romaine for the record, so I'm not sure of, other than tier 3, tell me why you want to know what the person's residency is.
okay, so we're getting way ahead.
Yep, yep.
I want to know 75%, when we had the joint county commissioner meeting, Ernie had a slide, and I believe 75% of permit holders are non-residents.
Right.
Okay? So I want to know if non-resident owners have more violations
Gotcha.
than resident owners.
Okay.
And if they do, and I've heard someone before mention that there might be tier 2 and tier 2 twos, tier 2 super 2s, right? We may find that 10 has a little different aspect than 4 does. And so we may get into tier 1, 2, and 3, but tier 2 may be separated. And at some point in time, the same logic that came about management companies for tier 3s may be applied to super 2s. Maybe. I mean, we got to reach a consensus, but just for right now, I think if we're going to say residency, being a Douglas County resident is important for management of a tier 3, we ought to define what that is. And I think it ought to be a certain number of days here. And then we need to think about the logic of what, because now we have people who live here and happen to live somewhere else on the few days they rent their apartments. Now, some people own different places, but other people don't.
And couldn't we use a simple form, and I'm not going to use the right word here, AJ, but where you, like a declaration?
There's
that- Yeah, that I'm a resident?
there-
Because there's no way to know for sure, but if there's a declaration from somebody, then you have some backup to give them a violation or pull a permit or whatever it is if they have, call it, perjured themselves on this declaration. Lauren?
Lauren Romaine for the record, I'm okay to to move on, I'm okay to add to the affidavit that I just signed for mine that says, this is where I legally reside. I'm fine with that, if that helps you for your future issues.
What does legally reside mean?
Well, you can define it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
yes,
go ahead and
okay,
define
yes.
it and stick it in, and I don't see it as an
Okay.
onerous
Chris?
addition.
Okay.
So, Chris Willett for the record, NRS has a lot to say about, like, in Nevada, on different things and when you can, what qualifies you for different residency and rights. And for instance, if I'm going to school in Nevada and I'm claiming state residence, I have to, for a university, I have to be here for 12 months. If I'm applying for a hunting or fishing license in the state of Nevada as a resident, I have to be here for 6 months. Driver's license is only 30 days. So there's a lot in NRS that has different criteria, so just keep that in mind.
As a snowbird shopping consumer, I can tell you that Nevada and Florida and Arizona have some of the easiest residency requirements because they want you to be a resident there. You don't have to we're not going to make you change your driver's license, yada, yada, yada. So there's a purpose of NRS that's going to define residency. There's a purpose to define residency for, I'm here so much that I don't need a management company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I believe that we should have something, and we can debate what that is, and I'm okay, I'm open to suggestions as long as it's something.
What do you suggest?
183 days.
Oh, everybody does that and they don't live here.
What did you say?
No, I mean, I'll tell you, just personally, I count
Yeah, you,
all my days to make sure, well, I'm on this committee, right? And
Yep,
if I don't
yep,
live here in
yep.
183 days, I
Yep.
need to resign from this committee.
Yep.
So I make sure that I am here 183 days a
Right.
year. But I believe that we have, if we start, if we already in tier 3, we say if you are a resident, you don't need a management company. And I believe there are people who will push that definition so they don't lose 20% of the revenues. You already saw situations where I hire a management company because you made me, but I'm going to manage the property by myself. And you saw the dramatic outcome where people are parked in the snow because they're on vacation in Reno. right? And those are people who hired a management company. You can imagine people who haven't hired a management company who should have.
Okay, so should we add it as a definition then, and then it can be done globally through the
Yes,
document?
and I would propose 183 days, but I would leave that to county staff if they believe there's something different. But I think you ought to live here more than half the year if you claim to be a resident.
Okay.
AJ Hames for the record, we can write up a change with 183 days. Does the board want to add any specific documentation to establish 183 days, or is it just going to be a declaration signed by the applicant?
I'd like every Facebook post for the past 12 months. And your telephone record, cell tower log. No, no, it is simply a declaration that you live here 183 days. Residency would mean 183 days.
Yes.
And if we see evidence to the contrary, we can push back.
Minimum of.
Well, by the way, if you're renting 12 months a year and you rented almost every weekend, I suspect you weren't here. I suspect no one lives here Monday through Thursday, year round.
Lauren?
And I'm just, Lauren, for the record, just, my only thing is that I think what you're trying to fix is that the residents are the people that are here. Like, I consider myself a hybrid VHR owner because I live right, like, you know, and so we want to know that. And I just think reality of it is there's many people who claim residency in Nevada and don't live here. So to me, if you really want to know that I would advocate for a higher number. 250, 280, 300. But that's.
Well, because there is a two.
But I don't know. So I'm ready to add it.
So
and move- and walk through it.
274 is also a tax number, because 274 is 3/4. Yeah, 183 is half a year. So
Yeah, right,
365
right,
is one
right,
more day
right,
than half a
yep,
year.
yep.
Okay.
274, I think, is the next number.
So-
I'm okay with.
Let's start with the 183
Let's
that
do
everybody.
321 and just be different.
I like that. I like it. Okay, I'm good.
Okay, we'll look at it again when we see it in a red line. We were on number B. Anything else on B? 5B, 5C? You see where they've stricken the local contact person must be available for contact regarding any complaint 24 hours a day, because it's probably redundant without looking at the small print. Anything on C or D? E?
Yes.
Oh, I have an E also, okay.
Lauren, remain for the record. So I have supposed wording, but this, the number of bedrooms and the availability of on-site, we have to fix this on-site because right now it makes all common area parking illegal. And so what I had was the availability of on-site, or in the case of an HOA, common area parking. Because no one in an HOA has any, well, not no one, but the majority of people in an HOA do not have on-site parking. So we need to allow for HOA common area parking.
AJ Hames for the record. Ernie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the way that that's been interpreted thus far is that on-site could also include common areas, because it's not specifically, on-site's not specifically defined to mean within the property lines or anything like that, and so I
It
think
means not off-site.
the interpretation is, yeah, I mean, it literally means not off-site, but then within that, what does it really mean? I think the interpretation of the director, and then by designation Ernie and his staff, has just been that that would also include common area parking.
That's fine, it's just not clear to many of us, and I've been told years ago when I first got my VHR permit that my common area parking was not legal. So I think some clarity on it, because it's, I don't know, I mean, on-site to me is somewhere on your property, but maybe it's not. I mean-
Can we do something simple like on property or community parking?
Yes.
You know, simple couple of words?
Madam Chair, something even more simple is take out on-site. The number of bedrooms and available parking, because by the way, I have a more conceptual thing. I thought this was part of litigation. Because read the whole sentence, the number of bedrooms and available will determine the maximum number of occupants allowed by the permit at any time. I thought all of that had been removed. The only time that parking determines occupancy is if you have 4 plus
+2.
plus 2. If you don't use your plus 2, you could have 1 parking spot for an 8-person place, right? So this, I thought this would, am I mistaken?
No, it's fine. You're good.
You're not mistaken about the +2, and somewhere in here is that you need to be able to park on property, which should be community parking or not, or communal parking, whatever the word you want to use.
But his solution is good. I mean, why not take out on-site? I mean, that's the availability of parking.
The number of bedrooms and availability of parking will determine the maximum number of occupants.
Because if someone only has 1 parking space, Ernie's not going to give them 8 occupants.
But that's what they would say.
He might, for AJ Ames for the record, for a tier 2 where they're not seeking the +2 provision, parking is not part of the calculation. And so if there's 1 parking spot designated for that tier 2 unit, if they have 3 bedrooms, for example, they could still get 6. But they would be permitted for occupancy of 6 and 1 parking space.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Okay,
So it would be
And that was,
cumbersome.
and that was a result of the lawsuit, which
Right.
Keith was mentioning, is that
Right.
the occupancy number itself isn't dependent upon the parking, except in certain situations. So this paragraph isn't inconsistent with that later, because later it specifies that it's dependent upon bedrooms, unless it's a tier 3, or it's or they're using the +2 provision, in which case parking can be taken into account.
Okay.
So what shouldn't, this is the application, so shouldn't this actually just say, state the number of bedrooms to be rented and the number of available parking? And just take out that last sentence about determine the maximum in other words, this is their application. So it's state the number of bedrooms to be rented and the number of available parking spaces. Full stop.
AJ Ames for the record, since that is covered elsewhere in the code, you could take that out. It doesn't need to be here. Then so it would just say state the number of bedrooms that may be rented and the availability of parking.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because it's the application. No?
We don't, well, yeah, but, okay, what was great about having on-site there was basically you are saying, this is where your parking is. What scares me is we've gone totally the opposite way, available of parking, and the availability of parking. So now we get into these creative things, which I don't want to see. So someone says, well, I live in this HOA and I've got parking down on this other street, which happens a lot, and they don't. And so I'm concerned that maybe it doesn't belong here. Maybe that's the thing. So we just need that. And so maybe somewhere else, we just make sure that we're not talking about having a VHR here and a half a mile away showing that I've got parking. And so I want to make sure that okay.
Yeah, so that's why I just took it out, because it's somewhere else. We do the reference parking to the code where we talk about how to define parking spaces.
Right.
Okay.
I'm finding the way we just take it out, or we reference the paragraph where we're gonna talk about on-site, we'll talk about parking.
Gotcha. Okay.
Michael, do you have any comments on this?
The only comment I had before we started was that I don't believe that we are required to go with the litigation settlement in perpetuity. I mean, we can make recommendations to say, parking is kind of important to us, and maybe we need to look at that. So that's all I have to say at this point right now.
Thank you. So F,
I do have something on F.
5, okay, go ahead, Michael.
Just semantics. The term, second line says, special parking conditions on guests of vacation home rentals, and that is vague. Does that mean guests of the renters of the vacation home rentals? I just want to tighten that up a little bit. Maybe we just put renters of vacation home rentals, or what definition do we use of the person that
Wouldn't it be
actually rents?
occupants?
Occupants of the vacation home rental.
AJ Haynes for the record, this could also, you could go Keith Byers style and just eliminate some of it. Douglas County reserves the right to impose special parking conditions in areas or under circumstances which justify.
I'm good with
it.
that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yep,
Madam Chair, I hate to go back, but I missed one of my comments.
okay.
Do you, back up in D, acknowledgement that all designated bedrooms meet the definition specified in 2062-020. And do you remember have we parked about what other primary purposes? Is that already there?
It's on the parking lot.
Thank you, okay, we can,
Yep.
Okay. All right, so F, we're taking out G.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay, so a diagram and photo of the premises showing bedrooms, all interior rooms, and then we get this on-site, but parking spaces in garages, driveways, or other parking spaces if you want to, but, you know, it's just that on-site thing again that, I mean, I've been told by county staff that on-site means on your property. So I just, you know, I just want to make sure it's clear.
And I also had that flag
So-
for adding like communal parking
On-
and parking spaces allotted to each residence or an HOA.
And I like the word allotted. Let me say this, well, Mr. Hames is listening to this because I like allotted because like in our HOA, we do keep track of how many cars every owner has, but we do not have assigned parking, nor will we ever. And so just because it's not assigned does not mean that we don't care, or we don't hold owners accountable, or we don't keep track of it. So the allotted, I really like that word versus reserved.
I got a good word.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's important because Ernie and I came into that when we were at Pine Wild, where they were talking how they really have 1.5 spaces allotted per unit.
Right.
So
And then the last, I'm sorry, the
Yeah,
last
no,
sentence here,
go ahead.
final determinations regarding suitable parking, just take the on-site out again, or, you know, so that's all I have.
Okay. Anything else on G?
Yeah, I have one. So this is Ernie for the record. So to the sentence, I think when it says county makes final determinations and stuff like that. So what we're doing with tier twos, as I mentioned earlier, is we're going there and we're measuring and we're substantiating the measurements that they're giving us. Because we have seen some interesting drawings where they have five, you know, in the driveways in Talbot Township, a lot of them are, they're not like the valley, right? They have angles. And so they'll tuck them in, they'll tuck five in there. And we'll end up taking 2 away or 3 away. And it will show them the measurements and educate them. But, and then hopefully they don't do it again, you know, they don't do that.
We have a lot of these because of TRPA.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Madam Chair, I do think we need to have a correlation or some tie between the photograph and the diagram. You know, I get a bunch of pictures and I get a diagram, and I've got no idea what picture is what. And so I think it ought to say a diagram and photograph of the premises showing bedrooms on site, bedrooms, parking spaces, and just take out all the rest of that sentence. And then photographs shall be labeled to go to the diagram.
Yeah, this is Ernie Strela for the record. I mean, so I think that this is tying to when you do the application, you're uploading a ton of files. I don't know if you used Acela yet, but we've migrated to Acela. And so Acela makes you put up all these different files specific for that address. So it's zipped up as that file for that address.
Yeah, but can't I name, so in other words, Acela, I'm loading a file. I can load the file, master bedroom, guest room 1, guest room 2. I guess what I'm saying is consuming this information on tier 3s, I've got a bunch of pictures and I got a diagram and I can't tell what bed is where and anything else.
You're talking about tier 3. I'm talking about all of them.
But wouldn't it mean,
It doesn't matter.
okay, all right.
It doesn't matter.
And when they upload a picture of their garage, is the garage door open so you can see that the garage can be utilized?
Sometimes.
Do you need the wording in there?
Some picture of a garage.
No, I mean, sometimes people will angle it in such a way where I can't see the bookshelf or something that blocks out, it's really a 1-car garage and it's,
Yeah.
right, it's 2-car, but they built a book, or they got their canoes in the garage or something, you know. That's fine.
So G, is there more discussion on G?
Then there was another on-site towards the end, we talked about that, I'm sorry, no, I'm good.
H,
I have just a comment on H. Mr. Strela, how do you require proof of occupancy tax remittance? Do they make a copy of their last remittance and send it in, or how do they do that?
Ernie Strela for the record. So HDL tracks all that, so they track the remittances going back forever. You know,
So
they've been
the
tracking.
actual permittee doesn't really have to provide that,
No,
so,
they part of their surveillance model, they track the rentals,
yes,
and then they make sure that they're getting their collection.
okay. And one sidebar question, now that you've gone to a different format, is there unlimited documents that you can upload now?
Yes, sir.
okay, H, I,
I have something.
okay.
We and individual county commissioners have story after story after story of a local contact saying they're not the local contact, I'm the maid. And so I believe, so in I, we say acknowledgement that the owner, agent, and local contact person have each read the regulations pertaining to the operation of vacation home rental and will comply with all requirements of this chapter. I believe the local contact needs to sign an acknowledgement that they are the local contact and they have the follow and have the duties of the local contact that they actually sign up for.
I actually agree with you.
I mean, there's just case after case after case where people call and I didn't know I was a contact. You know, I'm a maid for 5 places. Sure, I passed this test, but I'm not the, don't bother me, it's midnight.
Ernie Strela for the record. In addition to that, we don't need to write this part down, but we are doing audits of all our emergency contacts. So we have staff down to do that. So we actually put a script together so we can gently nudge them to tell us the right answer. And then the plan is to go back every 6 months and keep rechecking some of these addresses, because I know it's been a problem. I've heard it from everybody.
But if you could take over the IRS and gently nudge me to give the right answers about my tax return, I'd appreciate it. I mean, I don't know if we ought to be nudging people to give us the right answers.
86,000 people.
What's that? Well, I don't know if we ought to be nudging to give the right answers, but I do think the local, I mean, you know, if no one else agrees, I'm okay with passing on it, but I think we ought to get, local contacts are so critical. They need to sign, we need a statement from them that they specifically, these are my duties and I accept that responsibility. And we'll get into
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
not allowed local contacts in there.
So, we're done with I, let's go to J. We have one red line. Lauren?
Yeah, so I put in some wording, but let me just talk about the issue a second. So, I'll put on my HOA board hat, and that is, they're supposed to acknowledge, right now, the process is, you're supposed to acknowledge that you notified the HOA that you're gonna rent, correct? We never get those. And so, if we could, we would take a lot, because Mr. Strela knows, I've asked a couple of times for a list of the ones that are in our area. And I do think that there are some HOAs that don't care. And I can tell you one neighborhood that doesn't. And they don't want to know. And there might be others that say we don't care and we don't want to know. My question is I know my HOA does care. And it would be great, because then I wouldn't have to keep going back to the county and saying, can I have a new list? That if the HOA, this is becoming cumbersome. So, yeah, go ahead.
So Ernie Strela for the record, I actually have an idea, because I did it at Elks Point. So when some of the folks have come up for a renewal, the HOA document that they file, this is more of a testament that they went to the HOA or they're part of an HOA community, really.
Right.
And it's okay to do it. Are they correct? I don't know. But that's what the form says. What I think is a better tool is to have them go to the HOA and have something signed by the HOA at that time, right? Where instead of them attesting to it, the HOA attests to it, that it's okay to to rent or something like that, and have that uploaded into the documents.
So let me just from the Lauren remain for the record, is that you may, just so you know, you may, and I'm all for it, okay, because we want to know. But you may run into HOAs that don't want to do that.
That's fine.
So I don't know how you deal with it if you don't, but
I can track it.
okay.
I can track it. But I know
Because
that
they
there's
used to
several
do it.
that do.
They used to do it. Oh,
It used to be a
do it, yes.
requirement.
Yeah.
And as a GID and a HOA similar to like Elk Point, where you're more of a social type club, there was some legal concerns by some of the residents with legal backgrounds that all we should be able to do is say, yes, they're, permitted in this neighborhood, not that we're okey dokey with it, because a lot of them aren't.
And that, I'm sorry, that's what my HOA would just say. I mean, not that we want to get into any approval process or disapproval process. We just want to know because we also have requirements of VHRs within our HOA.
Okay.
So I don't know what the wording is. Are we good with that?
It might be as applicable or as we deem, because you're right, there's a lot of there's 39, I mean, one's unaffiliated, so there is no HOA.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, by definition. So there are a lot of neighborhoods that don't have an HOA, there's a lot to do, and so those ones that, we can word it in such a way, and I'm sure AJ can figure it
AJ.
out.
Well, I would just note that the final sentence is Douglas County may require the applicant to provide documents in support of the statement. And so already, I think the code authorizes Ernie, if he knows what HOAs are interested in getting notice of new VHRs, then he has discretion now to require people in those neighborhoods to say, oh, you live in Tahoe Village, I know that your HOA cares about this, so one of the additional documents I'm going to require you to provide is a notice from your HOA that they're aware of your VHR.
Yep.
So I think the code already allows for that. It would just be more of an administrative task that would be done.
Okay.
Okay. So anything else on J? Going to K,
Yes, ma'am.
okay?
I wasn't sure what a chapter is. This is 20.622-30, and what we're talking about is in 2622-40, D11 to be specific. Is that the same chapter? Is 20 the chapter, or is 622 a chapter, or is 30 the chapter? Because it's actually in 40.
Sorry, where are we?
In K, it says acknowledgement that the owner, agent, local contact person will post a vacation home rental with the notice required in this chapter.
The chapter is 622.
Okay, so it is, okay.
So this entire VHR code that we refer to as the VHR code, it's actually chapter
All right.
622, section 030, subsection
All right, so
A5D.
so it doesn't matter if this is in 30, that's in 40. Okay, I'm fine then.
Yeah.
Okay. K or K, whatever comes, yes?
I'm sorry, so the note I had in there is, does this happen? So is there acknowledgement that they will put, is that part of the affidavit? I was thinking I think I did my notes before I did my process, so maybe I missed it, but
Yeah, no, I'm trying to see what see the noticing. I don't think that's happening.
I mean, I know the inspectors make sure.
Acknowledgement that the owner, agent, or local contact person has or will post a vacation home rental with the notice required in this chapter. What notice?
Well, your permit has to be-
It's the 2622-40-D11 is what I think you're talking about. If you go to section 40D11, I think that's what you're talking about. But I guess I had to guess.
This one got it cut out or something, I don't know.
The way I take it is that I have to have my permit posted. And then there's also some other things about like bearer information, blah,
Is
you
that
know,
the permit?
that kind of stuff. But is that what? I'm sorry.
Is that what K means? Is that the permit posted in the house? Or?
That's how I took it, but I don't remember also if it was part of the affidavit that I signed, that I would post. I don't remember. And so I was just wondering if that happened.
No, in section 20, and maybe we ought to reference it because of this thing, but in 2622-40-D11, we say the owner of the vacation home rental must post a copy of the permit and a copy of the conditions set forth in this section in a conspicuous place. And then there's A through J. And I think that's what it's talking about, not just the permit. Because it says, you know, 622-40-D, .D.11 talks about what you gotta post. It's not
So
just the permit.
if we don't know what it is, they don't know what it
Yeah,
is.
correct. So
So
can we
it
just put
needs
a
to be
reference?
clarified.
Yeah,
Right.
let's just put the reference 20.622.40D11.
If in fact that's what is meant.
It is now because I decided that's what it means. Well, that section says
Right.
you have to
Right.
post this.
Right.
So I think that's what it was.
Right.
Okay. So this is the interior posting of the permit in
Correct.
the house?
Not just
And
not the
other-
permit,
and other
it's More
things.
stuff than the permit.
And all the other
Yes.
stuff, yeah.
So that, just AJ Haynes from the DA's office for the record, this is a modification to subsection K, acknowledgement that the owner, agent, or local contact person has or will post a vacation home rental with the notices required in, and we're changing this chapter to section, it'll say section 040D11.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay, anything
And that
else?
would obviously change if
And,
in fact the
The
numbering
numbers
changes.
change.
and do you want to put, I'm sorry, Lauren, remain for the record, do you want to put notices? Because there actually are multiple things that we're supposed to be posting.
Mhm.
And this makes me think it's just my permit.
So we'll make sure notices, sure, yes, I will make that change.
Okay.
Notices.
So if there's nothing else on
Nope.
K, L,
I had something weird, oh. no.
L is about the safety inspection.
Yep.
M, okay, I think there's gonna be some comments on M, so,
I guess from who?
yep.
I would like staff to review umbrella coverage. I don't know if you've ever tried to litigate under umbrella coverage, but the first thing that happens is your umbrella coverage sues your primary coverage. And I'll tell you, if you are a renter who is injured on a property and your liability is covered under umbrella coverage, it is a much more complicated legal procedure than if it's a single policy. I don't believe we should allow umbrella coverage, but I can't claim any expertise, and I would like staff to research that. And if it's just as easy and I'm wrong, then I think we can leave it as it is. But if it is harder to litigate or harder to claim under an umbrella policy, then I don't believe that we should allow this coverage to be under an umbrella policy. We have one tier 3 already, and I would like to exclude specifically umbrella coverage from this.
Yeah, Ernie Strela for the record. When Sam Taylor was here, he and I we spent about 4 hours arguing on a Friday about umbrella in this, so I became very educated. We agree. The umbrella coverage, what he specified is that when you're covering property, whether at $300, $500, or $1 million based on the tier, that it needs to name the property, it needs to somehow specify short-term, home sharing, something, and be, covered up this county, right? And the umbrella coverage doesn't do that, because we have seen, I think on tier 3s where it's covered 5 properties, I think that might have been where we had that argument. Yeah, I agree with you, because he made that comment too, that the umbrellas, there's some level of consternation that goes on between.
Umbrellas hate
Yeah.
primaries and primaries hate
And I'm not an
umbrellas.
expert, but
Everybody
I learned a
crosses.
lot from him on that, so.
Everybody crosses under umbrella coverages, trust me.
Is there any other insurance? I have one comment to make, but just if somebody else does, I'm deferring to them on insurance. Michael?
Just
Big difference.
feeling of the board, should tier 2s, maybe higher level tier 2s, have a higher amount? Seems 500,000 seems low. Thoughts from the board?
And I wonder if that's something we should visit when we get into the tiers.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it might be putting horse before the
Right,
cart.
right.
Um,
Come back to it.
And the comment I'm about to make,
Yeah,
because
I
we're
think
gonna
so.
have to end with insurance, because we need some public comment, and then we're gonna have to release the room.
Okay.
But I had a question for AJ, and it came to me from a resident who was asking that should the insurance by a permit holder, should they be required to add Douglas County as an additional insured. To protect Douglas County from being, let's say, sued if someone falls on a permitted vacation home rental. He's speechless.
Lauren's example is perfect.
And you know, like where I live, we have a GID, and we allowed some GID property to be landscaped by a homeowner because they didn't want to look at just a mountain. So we required them to add the GID to their homeowner's insurance as an additional insured to protect us. That's the only hard example I can give you.
I think that would, I mean, it hasn't come up because no one's, as far as I know, been injured and filed a big lawsuit based on something that happened in a VHR. But I mean, the whole point of the insurance section, obviously, is to account for that. I mean, it's certainly something that could be proposed, and then ultimately, I think it's possibly more of a policy consideration that maybe the Board of County Commissioners would like to discuss. But if this board wants to recommend it for their subsequent discussion, I think that would be proper.
Madam Chair, I don't know if you're familiar with the Cape Cod case right now. A renter of the VHR died of carbon monoxide poisoning. They are suing the homeowner. They are suing the county. They're suing the fire inspection. They're suing everybody in the world because they died of carbon monoxide poisoning because the things didn't work. And I don't believe they required an annual inspection or something else, but they're suing everybody. So I'd like the county to consider that.
Okay. I'm willing to throw it out if it's just redundant or going to cause a lot of problems for permit holders, but it just sounded like something that made a little bit of sense to me.
I believe it's Cape Cod, but
Okay.
I mean, I think it'd be good.
Pennsylvania.
Huh?
I'm sorry.
I thought, okay, maybe,
Yeah.
or Martha's Vineyard. But if you Google it, these things happen, and I'd like the county to consider it and give us some
Well, I
advice.
just want to protect the county. Michael?
Well, my only point is that additionally insured is sometimes difficult, and different companies may not do additional insurance, and these are major companies. So we just need to maybe have some research on that.
Right.
I mean, I like the fact that Douglas County would be additionally insured. I think would it be a difficult thing to obtain for a lot of our permit holders is the one other factor.
And I know you're right, because we're having some difficulties with, different insurance companies getting additional insurance.
Madam Chair, and I think as long as the county looks at the issue, it could be that the county, I don't know what the county's insurance plans are, but I don't know if the county was sued, are they already insured? And if they're not insured, maybe buy a special plan to take the cost and the permit fees of this program. So I guess it's the county's insurance as much as anything else that we're asking the question on. We're looking out for you guys.
Yeah, well, I just think that's part of our job. I think that we need to close this down now, because we need public comment. You have another, there's another group coming in at 4:30, right? So they have to set up for that?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. So,
We only need 3 minutes for public comment.
because I don't see
I didn't shorten
another,
that.
I don't see another place for us to stop. So, with that, let's stop and let's take closing public comment.
I'll just put 2 behind my name.
Okay.
Kathy Oyster. So we've talked a little bit about the additional people involved with these processes, and they bear no liability whatsoever. This 24-hour contact person, you're asking them to sign that they're the contact person, but really there's no pain if they don't answer their phone. There should be a fine. As you're going through this, there needs to be a fine. There needs to be, and it has to be a big one. It has to be hard, it has to be meaningful, so that they're signing purposefully and meaningfully. Same with the property manager. There was much discussion about the preference for violations to be reported to property managers or the VHR program in last week's Tier 3. The VHR program reports straight away to the property manager anyway. So it's impossible to require the neighborhood, and the program should not be designed around the possibility that the neighborhood will follow your design. They're probably going to follow the police, call 911. That's just the more natural thing to do. However, we have heard from local managers, the Gunthers specifically, that they've made it clear that their properties don't have violations, but that they acknowledge complaints, and that the complaints have resulted in Mr. Gunther literally escorting customers from the residence. So I'd say it was likely that that was an unrecorded violation. So you do need to understand some of the deficits of the program and what the community has to deal with. So putting in place some of these standards of responsibility and cause and effect will help us support your program.
Thank you, Kathy. I guess there's no one left out there for a public comment. Okay, well, this will conclude our meeting. We'll be back on our regular schedule in January. I'm gonna talk with Ernie at some point about maybe having some additional meetings, because this is going a slower process than I anticipated, but we'll discuss that and get back to everybody. And thank you for coming, and happy holidays to you.
Yeah.
And
Happy holidays, Happy New Year.
So what was our normal, the third Wednesday?
fourth Wednesday.